The hospital bed crashed sideways as the patient's body seized so violently that restraint snapped loose. Blood sprayed across monitors while doctors screamed orders that made no sense. And the middle-aged nurse everyone treated like dirt, the one they'd just fired 20 minutes ago, suddenly barked commands in a voice that made federal agents freeze mid-step. Because Sarah Mitchell wasn't just a nurse, she was a ghost from a war the government never admitted happened. If you want to see how the woman they humiliated becomes the person they'll beg to save them, stay with me until the very end. Like this story and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this journey reaches across the world. Sarah Mitchell's scrubs smelled like disinfectant and 12 consecutive hours of other people's emergencies. She stood at the nurse's station inside Riverside General Hospital in Minneapolis, Minnesota, filling out discharge paperwork while her lower back screamed for mercy. 48 years old. Graveyard shift. Nobody's first choice for anything. "Hey, Mitchell," the voice came from behind her, dripping with condescension. "Did you actually chart that the guy in bed 7 has a history of arrhythmia, or did you just forget again?" Dr. Marcus Webb, 34. Trauma surgery. Hair gel that cost more than Sarah's weekly grocery budget. He leaned against the counter with his arms crossed, looking at her like she was a stain on his expensive shoes. Sarah didn't turn around. "I charted it. Check the system." "I did check. It's incomplete." "Then you didn't look at the right file." Webb exhaled through his nose, loud enough to make sure everyone nearby could hear his frustration. "You know what your problem is, Mitchell? You've been doing this so long you think experience makes up for actual competence." Two nurses at the far end of the station glanced over, then quickly looked away. Nobody ever defended Sarah. Not because they were cruel exactly, just because defending her meant putting themselves in Webb's crosshairs. And who needed that kind of stress? Sarah finally turned to face him. Her eyes were pale gray, the kind that didn't give anything away. "The file's complete, Dr. Webb. I did my job. Your job is to follow my orders without questioning me." "Your orders are usually fine. This time, you missed something." Webb's jaw tightened. For a second, it looked like he might actually lose his temper in front of the whole station. But he caught himself, smiled thinly, and lowered his voice to something that sounded almost friendly. "Almost. Mitchell, I'm going to give you some free advice. You're not a doctor. You're not a PA. You're a floor nurse who's been here too long, and honestly, you're starting to embarrass yourself. Maybe it's time to think about early retirement before someone makes that decision for you." He walked away before she could respond. Not that she would have. Sarah had learned a long time ago that silence was sharper than any comeback. She finished her paperwork, logged out of the terminal, and headed toward the break room. Her knees hurt. Her shoulders hurt. Her entire skeleton felt like it had been assembled incorrectly. Inside the break room, two younger nurses sat scrolling through their phones. They looked up when Sarah walked in, and the energy shifted immediately. Not hostile, just awkward. "Hey, Sarah," one of them said. Jessica, 26. Still believed the job was about helping people instead of surviving until your next paycheck. "Hey." Sarah grabbed her thermos from the fridge and poured herself cold coffee that tasted like regret. She didn't sit down. Sitting meant staying, and staying meant small talk. And small talk eventually circled back to the same question everyone asked, but never said out loud. "Why are you still here?" The other nurse, Amanda, glanced at Jessica, then back at Sarah. "You okay? I heard Webb was being a dick again." "Webb's always being a dick," Sarah said. "It's like his baseline personality." Jessica laughed nervously. "Yeah, but he was extra loud about it tonight. Everyone heard. Everyone always hears." Amanda shifted in her seat. "Look, Sarah, I know it's none of my business, but do you ever think about, reporting him? For hostile work environment or whatever?" Sarah took a sip of cold coffee. "To who? His golf buddy who runs HR? Or maybe the hospital director who gave him Physician of the Year last month? That's so messed up." "That's reality." Jessica's phone buzzed. She glanced at it and her face changed. "Oh crap, they're calling me back to pediatrics. Apparently there's some kid with respiratory distress." She grabbed her badge and hurried out. Amanda followed a moment later, leaving Sarah alone with the hum of the ancient refrigerator and her own thoughts. She left the break room and walked down the hallway toward the emergency department. Riverside General wasn't a huge hospital, but it was busy enough. Gunshot wounds, overdoses, car accidents, heart attacks. The usual parade of human fragility. Sarah had seen worse, a lot worse. But nobody here knew that. The ER doors hissed open and she stepped into controlled chaos. Monitors beeping, residents yelling updates. A guy on a gurney screaming about government surveillance while two security guards tried to hold him still. "Mitchell!" She turned. Charge nurse Dennis Hale waved her over. Dennis was 52, balding, and perpetually exhausted. He was also one of the few people in the hospital who didn't treat Sarah like a relic. "What's up?" she asked. "I need you to take Trauma 3. Incoming GSW ETA, 4 minutes. I'm off in 20. I know. But Torres called in sick and we're short. You mind?" Sarah glanced at the clock. She'd already worked a double. Her feet felt like they'd been beaten with hammers. But Torres had 3 kids and a deadbeat ex-husband, and if she called in sick, it probably wasn't because she felt like sleeping in. "Yeah, I got it." Dennis smiled. "You're a lifesaver, Mitchell." Sarah walked toward Trauma 3 and started prepping. IV setup, intubation kit, suction, gauze, hemostats. She moved through the routine on autopilot, her hands remembering what her brain didn't need to think about anymore. The ambulance arrived 6 minutes later. Paramedics wheeled in a kid who couldn't have been older than 19. Gunshot wound to the abdomen, pale, sweating, breathing fast and shallow. "Talk to me," Sarah said. "Single GSW, lower left quadrant," the lead paramedic rattled off. His name was Rodriguez, and Sarah had worked with him maybe 100 times. Vitals dropping, BP's 80/50. We got one line in, wide open. Found him behind a liquor store on Hennepin Avenue. Anonymous call. "Anonymous," Sarah repeated. "Yeah. Weird, right? Caller didn't leave a name, just an address." "He say anything to you?" "Kept mumbling something about not feeling right. Said his head hurt before he even mentioned the gunshot. Thought he was just in shock." Sarah filed that information away. "Let's move him." They transferred the kid onto the trauma bed. Sarah cut away his shirt while a resident started barking orders. Dr. Webb appeared a moment later, snapping on gloves and looking annoyed that his evening was being interrupted. "Pressure's dropping," Sarah said quietly. "I can see that," Webb shot back. "Get me an ultrasound." Sarah grabbed the portable unit and handed it over. Webb ran the probe across the kid's abdomen, frowning at the screen. "Free fluid, probable liver lack. Let's get him to OR." "Wait!" Sarah's voice cut through the noise. Webb looked up, irritated. "What?" "Check his pupils." "His pupils are fine." "Check them anyway." Webb stared at her like she'd just asked him to perform surgery with a spoon. "Mitchell, I don't have time for your—" "Just check them." Something in her tone made him stop. Maybe it was the fact that she wasn't yelling. Maybe it was the flatness in her eyes, like she'd already seen how this played out and was just waiting for him to catch up. Webb sighed, grabbed a pen light, and checked the kid's pupils. They didn't react. His expression changed. "That's weird." "It's not weird," Sarah said quietly. "It's wrong." "What are you talking about?" Sarah stepped closer, lowering her voice so the rest of the team wouldn't hear. "Look at his skin. Look at the way he's breathing. This isn't just a GSW." Webb glanced down at the patient, then back at Sarah. "You're saying what exactly?" "I'm saying this doesn't add up. People get shot, Mitchell. Sometimes they go into shock. That's not a conspiracy." His respiratory pattern's off. His pupils aren't responding. His skin's clammy, but not cold. Muscle fasciculations in his left arm. "You see that twitch? That's not hemorrhagic shock." Webb's face hardened. "So what is it then? Enlighten me." Sarah hesitated. For just a second, she felt the weight of something she'd buried years ago, a memory she'd spent a long time trying to forget. "I think he's been exposed to something." "Exposed to what?" "I don't know yet, but we need to isolate him, now. Full containment protocol." Webb laughed. Actually laughed. "You think this is a bioterror case because his pupils are a little sluggish?" "Jesus, Mitchell, you've been watching too much cable news." "I'm serious." "So am I, and I'm the attending physician, which means I make the calls. This kid has a GSW and he's bleeding out. We're taking him to surgery. End of discussion." Sarah didn't move. "If I'm right..." "You're not." "If I'm right, and we don't contain this, We could have a hospital-wide contamination event. Webb stepped closer, his voice dropping to a hiss. You want to shut down my ER and quarantine a trauma patient based on a hunch? Do you have any idea what that would do to this hospital? To my reputation? We have a board meeting tomorrow morning. The mayor's wife is upstairs in the VIP suite. There are 3 news vans outside covering that charity thing in the lobby. You want me to evacuate the building because you have a bad feeling? I don't care about your reputation. Well, you should, because if you keep pushing this paranoid crap, I'll make sure you never work another shift here. The room had gone quiet. Every nurse, every tech, every resident was watching. Sarah met Webb's eyes and didn't blink. You're making a mistake. No, Mitchell, you are, and I'm done tolerating it. He turned to Dennis. Hale, get her out of here. Dennis looked like he'd just been asked to shoot a puppy. Marcus, come on, but I said get her out, now. She's off this case, and as of tonight, she's suspended pending review. I want her badge, and I want her gone. Sarah felt the air leave the room. Suspended. Not just kicked off a case. Suspended. She didn't argue, didn't plead, didn't even look surprised. She just peeled off her gloves, dropped them in the bin, and unclipped her badge from her scrubs. She set it on the counter between them like she was laying down a poker hand. You'll regret this, she said quietly. Is that a threat? It's a prediction. She turned and walked toward the exit. Behind her, she heard Webb snap at the team. Let's get him prepped. We're moving in 3 minutes. And somebody call OR and tell them we're coming up hot. Sarah pushed through the ER doors and stepped into the hallway. Her chest felt tight, but not from anger. From something older. Something she'd trained herself not to feel anymore. Fear. Not for herself. For everyone in that room who had no idea what they were dealing with. She made it halfway to the locker room before the alarms started. At first, it was just one. A single, sharp beep from somewhere inside the ER. Then another. Then 5 more, all at once, overlapping into a chaotic symphony of electronic panic. Sarah stopped walking. She turned around slowly. Through the small window in the ER doors, she could see people running, monitors flashing red, someone shouting for a crash cart. Then the PA system crackled to life. Code Blue, Trauma 3? Code Blue, Trauma 3. Sarah's stomach dropped. She pushed back through the doors and saw chaos. The kid from the GSW wasn't just crashing. He was seizing. His whole body convulsed so violently that the bed rail bent under the force. Blood poured from his mouth. His eyes had rolled back so far that only the whites showed. And 2 nurses who'd been standing near him had collapsed. Just dropped. One was on the floor, twitching. The other was slumped against the wall, gasping for air like she'd just run a marathon. What the hell? Webb's voice was high, panicked. What's happening? Nobody answered. Because nobody knew. Sarah watched the scene unfold with a horrible, creeping sense of déjà vu. She'd seen this before. Not here. Not in Minneapolis. But somewhere else. Somewhere the government had spent a lot of money making sure nobody ever talked about. A resident stumbled backward, clutching his chest. I can't breathe. Another nurse collapsed. Then a respiratory therapist. Webb was shouting into a phone now. I need poison control. Somebody tell me what's happening. Sarah moved without thinking. Old training kicked in, muscle memory from a life she'd tried to forget. She grabbed a surgical mask from the supply cart and pressed it over her mouth and nose, then moved toward the trauma bay. Dennis saw her coming. Mitchell, you're suspended. You can't. Get everyone away from that patient now. Sarah. Now, Dennis. Something in her voice made him move. He started pulling people back, away from Trauma 3, away from the kid whose body was still convulsing on the bed. Sarah approached carefully, watching the patient's symptoms. Muscle spasms. Excessive salivation. Pinpoint pupils. No, wait. They'd been dilated before. That meant the exposure was progressing, respiratory distress spreading to everyone nearby. She grabbed a pair of gloves and snapped them on, then reached for the patient's arm. His skin was ice cold now, pulse thready. The seizures were slowing, but not because he was stabilizing, because he was dying. Somebody shut down the ventilation system, Sarah called out. What? Webb was still on the phone, his face pale. The HVAC. Shut it down. It's spreading through the air. You don't know that. Do it or watch everyone in this ER die in the next 10 minutes. Webb stared at her. For the first time since she'd known him, he looked genuinely terrified. He spoke into the phone. Shut down ventilation to the ER. Do it now. The response came back, tinny through the speaker. Sir, we can't just shut down. I said do it. 10 seconds later, the air handlers went silent. The constant background hum of the hospital's breathing system just stopped. The ER felt like a tomb. Another monitor started alarming. The kid in Trauma 3 flatlined. Webb ran over, started compressions. Come on, come on! But Sarah could see it was over. Whatever had been in this kid's system, it had burned through him like wildfire. And now it was loose in the ER. She looked around at the chaos. 4 people down. Maybe more. The CDC would need to be notified. The FBI. Homeland Security. This wasn't a random OD or some street drug interaction. This was deliberate. Then the lights in the ER flickered and went red. The hospital's emergency containment system had activated. Steel shutters began sliding down over the exits with a mechanical whine. Automated locks engaged with heavy, final clicks. Red emergency lighting bathed everything in a hellish glow. What's happening? Someone yelled. Dennis was at a computer terminal, his face illuminated by the screen. Buildings in automatic lockdown, biohazard protocol. We're sealed in. Panic rippled through the staff. People rushed toward the exits, found them blocked, started pounding on the steel shutters. Let us out! I need to get out of here! Open the doors! Sarah stood in the center of the chaos, perfectly still. She'd been through this before. Different continent, different decade, but the same sick feeling in her gut. And then from somewhere outside, she heard the sound of engines, big engines. She walked to the nearest window and looked out into the parking lot. 3 black SUVs pulled up to the front entrance, moving fast. No sirens, no lights. Just clean, efficient speed. Armed figures in tactical gear poured out. Not police, not SWAT, military. They wore black fatigues with no insignia, helmets with full-face shields. They carried rifles Sarah recognized from a life she'd left behind. M4 carbines, military-grade biohazard suits underneath the tactical gear. The lead vehicle's door opened and a man stepped out, tall, broad shoulders, moving with the kind of precision that came from 1,000 hours of drills. He removed his helmet. Sarah's breath caught. She knew that face. Commander Ethan Cross, her old unit leader. The man who'd been there the night everything went wrong. The man who'd testified against her at the inquiry. The man who'd walked away with a promotion while she'd been quietly pushed out of the service with a file full of redactions and a non-disclosure agreement thick enough to stop a bullet. Cross said something into his radio, and his team moved toward the hospital entrance. They weren't asking for permission. They were taking control. Inside the ER, Dr. Webb was yelling at someone on the phone. I don't care what your protocols say, we need help now. The ER doors exploded open. Not the automatic sliding doors. The emergency access doors, the ones that required a key card and an override code. Someone had blown the electronic lock. Cross and his team stormed in, rifles raised, voices sharp and commanding. Everybody on the floor, hands where we can see them. Webb dropped the phone. Who the hell are you? You can't just... Federal emergency response, Cross barked. This facility is now under military quarantine. Anyone who interferes will be detained. This is my ER. Cross ignored him. His eyes scanned the room, moving over faces, assessing threats, calculating risks. And then his gaze landed on Sarah. He froze. For just a second, something flickered across his face. Surprise, recognition, maybe even relief. He lowered his rifle slightly and spoke, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. Where's Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell? The entire ER went silent. Every doctor, every nurse, every tech turned to look at Sarah. Webb's face went white. Lieutenant? Cross walked toward her, his boots echoing on the tile floor. When he reached her, he stopped, and then in front of everyone, he snapped to attention and saluted. Ma'am, he said quietly, we need you. Sarah looked at him for a long moment. Years of buried resentment bubbled up. The betrayal, the lies, the way he'd let her take the fall. But underneath that, she saw something else in his eyes. Desperation. What happened to following protocol, Commander? She asked quietly. Protocol went out the window 30 minutes ago when we got a biological signature match from your hospital's emergency systems. He leaned in closer, lowering his voice. Sarah, it's the same compound, Kandahar, 2019. It's back. The floor seemed to tilt under her feet. Kandahar. The mission nobody talked about. The one that had ended her military career and killed 17 people. The one she'd been blamed for. That's impossible, she whispered. We destroyed the samples. All of them. Apparently not. Around them, the ER staff was starting to recover from their shock. Webb pushed forward. Excuse me, I'm the attending physician here and I need someone to explain what the hell is going on. Cross didn't even look at him. Sergeant Hayes, detain that man. One of the tactical team members grabbed Webb by the arm. Webb tried to pull away. You can't do this. I'm a doctor. I have rights. You have the right to shut up, Hayes said calmly, before you contaminate the entire building and kill everyone in it. Webb's mouth opened and closed like a fish. No sound came out. Cross turned back to Sarah. I need you to walk me through exactly what happened here. Every detail. We've got maybe 2 hours before this spreads beyond containment. Sarah's mind was racing. You're telling me someone weaponized the Kandahar agent and deployed it in a civilian hospital in Minnesota? I'm telling you we have 4 people down with symptoms that match the Kandahar profile. 1 dead patient who is likely the initial vector, and a spreading contamination field that's already triggered federal emergency protocols. So yes, that's exactly what I'm telling you. Who authorized this response? Classified. Who's running the investigation? Also classified. And you expect me to just cooperate after what you people did to me? Cross's jaw tightened. I expect you to help save lives. Same as you always did. Same as you did 5 minutes ago when you shut down the HVAC before this got worse. Sarah glanced around the ER. People were scared, confused. Some were still on the floor trying to breathe. The staff members who'd collapsed were being attended to by other nurses, but nobody really knew what they were doing. Nobody except her. And maybe that was the worst part. After everything they'd taken from her, her career, her reputation, her identity, they still needed her. Because she was the only one who'd survived Kandahar, the only one who knew how the agent worked, the only one who might be able to stop it. Fine, she said, but I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for them. Cross nodded. Good enough. He turned to address the room, his voice shifting into command mode. Listen up. This hospital is now under federal quarantine. Nobody leaves. Nobody makes phone calls. Nobody posts on social media. Any violation will result in immediate detention. Are we clear? Silence. I said, are we clear? A few mumbled yeses. We're going to establish a clean perimeter and start decontamination procedures. Lieutenant Mitchell will be leading the medical response. What she says goes. No arguments, no questions. If you don't follow her orders, my people will remove you from the floor. Understood? More mumbles. A few nods. Webb was still being held by Sergeant Hayes. This is insane. You can't just put a nurse in charge of... Cross turned to look at him. Really look at him. Dr. Webb, is it? Yes. I'm the senior attending... Dr. Webb, how many biological contamination events have you responded to in your career? That's not the point. How many? Webb's face flushed. None. But I've had extensive training in... Lieutenant Mitchell has responded to 14. She's been exposed to chemical agents, biological weapons, and radiological hazards in 7 different countries. She's saved more lives in combat medicine than you've probably treated in your entire career. So when I say she's in charge, I mean she's in charge. Now shut the hell up and let her work. Webb looked like he'd been slapped. Cross turned back to Sarah. What do you need? Sarah took a breath. 14 contamination events. That was the official number anyway. The real count was higher, but most of those missions didn't exist on paper. She walked toward the center of the ER, her mind clicking through protocols she hadn't used in years. First, we need to identify who was in direct contact with the patient. Anyone who touched him, anyone within 6 feet, anyone who handled his belongings. They're priority 1 for decontamination. Cross nodded. Hayes, start making a list. Second, we need to seal off this section of the hospital. Nothing goes in or out without going through a decon station. That means air, water, people, everything. Already in progress. Third, I need access to the patient's admission records, where he came from, who called it in, what his talk screen showed. If this was a deliberate deployment, there'll be a pattern. Cross pulled out a tablet and started typing. I'll have our intelligence team pull everything. Sarah looked at the body in trauma 3. The kid who'd come in with a gunshot wound and died from something far worse. Fourth, she said quietly, we need to figure out why someone would release a military-grade nerve agent in a hospital ER on a random Tuesday night in Minneapolis. Because this wasn't random. Nothing about this is random. Cross met her eyes. You think it's targeted? I think we were set up. We? Sarah gestured around the ER. All of us. This kid gets shot, gets dropped off with an anonymous call, comes in presenting symptoms that most doctors would miss if I hadn't been here. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Cross's expression darkened. You're saying someone knew you'd recognize the signs. I'm saying someone wanted to see if I would. That's a pretty big assumption. You're here, aren't you? How did your team get activated so fast? Emergency response teams don't just show up within minutes unless someone was already watching. Cross didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was careful. There may have been prior intelligence. Prior intelligence about what? About a potential threat to this facility. When? Sarah, when did you know, Ethan? He flinched at the use of his first name. 3 days ago. We got chatter about a possible domestic incident involving a stolen biological sample. Minnesota was flagged as a potential target zone. And you didn't warn anyone? We couldn't. The intelligence was classified. We weren't even sure it was credible until people started dying. Cross looked away. Until your emergency containment system triggered and we got a signature match. Sarah wanted to punch him, wanted to scream, but there wasn't time. Around them, Cross's team was setting up equipment, portable air filters, decontamination tents, biohazard suits. They moved with practiced efficiency, transforming the ER into a disaster zone in a matter of minutes. Dennis approached cautiously. Sarah, what do you need from us? She turned to him, grateful for his steady presence. Get me a list of everyone who was in this room when the patient arrived. I need names, roles, and exact locations. Also, anyone who's feeling symptomatic, headache, nausea, difficulty breathing, muscle weakness. I need to know immediately. Got it. Dennis hurried off. Amanda, one of the younger nurses, stepped forward. Her face was pale but determined. I touched him. When we first transferred him to the bed, I helped cut off his shirt. Sarah looked at her, 24 years old, whole life ahead of her. How do you feel? Scared. Physically? Any symptoms? Amanda thought about it. My hands are shaky, but that might just be adrenaline. Probably, but we're putting you through decon anyway. You'll be fine. You promise? Sarah couldn't promise that. Wouldn't insult her by trying. I promise we'll do everything we can. Amanda nodded and walked toward the decontamination station being set up near the ambulance bay. Webb was still being held by Sergeant Hayes, but he'd stopped struggling. Now he just looked confused. I don't understand. What kind of nerve agent are we talking about? Sarin? VX? Sarah glanced at him. Worse. There's nothing worse than VX. You're wrong. Cross pulled her aside, away from the others. We need to talk about Kandahar. I don't want to talk about Kandahar. Sarah, if this is the same compound, we need to know how it got out. The official record says all samples were destroyed after the incident. The official record says a lot of things that aren't true. What's that supposed to mean? Sarah turned to face him fully. It means I was the scapegoat, Ethan. You know it. I know it. Everyone on that mission knew it. So don't stand here and pretend we're on the same team. We are on the same team, whether you like it or not. No. You're on the team that threw me away when it was convenient. I'm on the team trying to keep people alive. Cross's radio crackled. A voice came through, distorted by static. Commander, we've got movement on the 3rd floor. 2 individuals attempting to breach the quarantine perimeter. Cross swore under his breath. Copy that. Detain them. He looked at Sarah. We're not done talking about this. Yes, we are. He walked away, barking orders into his radio. Sarah stood in the middle of the ER, surrounded by chaos, and felt the weight of her past crashing back into her present. Kandahar. She'd spent 6 years trying to forget that name. 6 years building a quiet life as a nobody nurse in a medium-sized hospital where her biggest problem was an arrogant surgeon with a superiority complex. And now it was all back, the screaming, the bodies, the smell of chemicals burning through flesh. The thing about military-grade bioweapons was that they didn't just kill you. They destroyed you from the inside out, turning your own body into the enemy. Muscles tore themselves apart, lungs filled with fluid, blood vessels ruptured, and you stayed conscious through most of it. Sarah had watched 17 people die in Kandahar, had held their hands while they begged her to make it stop, had lied and told them it would be okay. She'd been the only one wearing a properly sealed suit when the canister ruptured. Pure luck. Or maybe fate had a sick sense of humor. Either way, she'd lived, and they'd made her wish she hadn't. The inquiry had lasted 3 months. They'd accused her of everything from negligence to sabotage. Never mind that she'd followed every protocol. Never mind that the intelligence had been bad from the start. Never mind that the mission should never have been authorized in the first place. Someone needed to take the blame, and Sarah had been convenient. They'd offered her a deal: resign quietly, sign the NDA, disappear. In exchange, they wouldn't court-martial her, wouldn't destroy her completely, just partially. She'd taken the deal, and she'd spent the last 6 years wondering if she'd made the right choice. Now, standing in the middle of another contamination event, watching history repeat itself, she had her answer. She hadn't. Dennis returned with a clipboard, his handwriting shaky but legible. 17 people had direct contact. Another 32 were within the 6-foot radius when he came in. Sarah took the list and scanned it. Names she recognized, people she'd worked with for years. Start running baseline vitals on everyone. Temperature, oxygen saturation, respiratory rate. I want numbers every 15 minutes. We don't have enough staff. Then use the ones who weren't exposed. Pull people from other floors if you have to. Dennis hesitated. Sarah, the whole hospital's locked down. Nobody's coming in or out. She looked up from the clipboard. Then we work with what we have. Cross's team had erected a decontamination tent near the ambulance bay. It looked like something from a disaster movie. Plastic sheeting, chemical showers, hazmat suits hanging on racks. Amanda stood at the entrance, watching 2 soldiers in full protective gear explain the procedure. Sarah walked over. You doing okay? Amanda's eyes were red. I called my mom before they took our phones, told her I loved her. She asked why I was being weird. Her voice cracked. I didn't know what to say. You're going to be fine. You don't know that. No, but I've seen this before, and the people who got treated early had better outcomes. You're getting treated early. Amanda wiped her eyes. Is it true what that commander said about you being military? Sarah nodded. Why didn't you ever tell anyone? Because it wasn't relevant. It's relevant now. Sarah didn't have an answer for that. She squeezed Amanda's shoulder and walked back toward the main ER. Webb was sitting on the floor now, his back against the wall. Hayes had finally let him go, but 2 armed soldiers stood nearby watching. Webb looked smaller somehow, deflated. Sarah crouched down next to him. How you feeling? Like my entire world just imploded. He didn't look at her. You're military. Was. Combat medic. Something like that. Webb laughed bitterly. I've been treating you like an idiot for 2 years. Turns out I'm the idiot. You're not an idiot, you're just arrogant. Thanks, that helps. You want honesty or comfort? Pick one. He finally looked at her. His eyes were bloodshot. Did I kill those people? The nurses who collapsed? Did I kill them by not listening to you? Sarah considered lying, decided against it. You delayed containment by approximately 8 minutes. That delay allowed the agent to spread further than it should have. So, yes, partially. Webb's face crumpled. Oh, God. But you didn't create this situation. Someone else did. You just made it worse. That's supposed to make me feel better? No, it's supposed to make you understand what's at stake if you don't start listening now. Cross appeared beside them. Mitchell, we've got a problem. Sarah stood. Another one? Hospital administration is threatening legal action. They're saying we have no authority to lock down the building without a court order. They're wrong. I know they're wrong, but they're making calls to every lawyer and politician they can reach. It's going to turn into a circus. Sarah thought about that. Where are they? Administrative wing, 3rd floor. Take me there. Cross led her through a maze of hallways, past confused patients and terrified staff. The red emergency lighting made everything look surreal, like they were moving through the guts of some dying machine. The administrative wing was quieter. Carpeted floors, framed photos of smiling executives, a receptionist's desk with a computer still glowing. Voices came from behind a closed door, angry voices. Cross opened it without knocking. 5 people sat around a conference table. Sarah recognized the hospital director, Martin Hastings, 60, gray hair, expensive suit. The head of legal, a woman named Patricia Vance, 2 board members whose names Sarah couldn't remember, and the hospital's chief financial officer, a nervous-looking man named Roger something. They all stopped talking when Cross entered. "Gentlemen, ladies," Cross's voice was ice. "I understand you have concerns." Hastings stood up. "Concerns? You've taken over my hospital with armed soldiers. You've locked us down without due process. You've put a nurse in charge of emergency medical operations. So yes, Commander, I have concerns." Cross didn't blink. "This facility is now under federal jurisdiction pursuant to the National Emergency Health Powers Act. All decisions regarding quarantine and containment are mine to make. If you interfere, you'll be arrested." "You can't arrest me. I run this hospital." "Not anymore." Patricia Vance leaned forward. "Commander, I've practiced health law for 23 years. What you're describing requires a declaration from the Secretary of Health and Human Services. Do you have such a declaration?" Cross pulled out his tablet and slid it across the table. "Signed 40 minutes ago. You'll note the federal reference number at the bottom." Vance read it, her face paling. "This is real." "Very." Hastings grabbed the tablet. "This is insane. We have protocols, procedures. You can't just storm in here." "Mr. Hastings," Sarah stepped forward. 4 of your staff are currently showing symptoms of nerve agent exposure. 1 patient is dead. If we don't contain this in the next 90 minutes, you're looking at mass casualties, maybe hundreds. So either sit down and let us work, or I'll have Commander Cross drag you out of here in handcuffs. Your choice." Hastings stared at her. "You're the nurse Webb fired tonight. Suspended. And yes, you have no authority here." "Actually, she does." Cross tapped the tablet. "Section 7, subsection C. In the event of a biological emergency, on-site personnel with relevant field experience may be designated as incident commanders. Lieutenant Mitchell has more experience with this type of contamination than anyone in this hospital, including you." Roger, the CFO, spoke up. His voice shook. "What kind of nerve agent are we talking about? Is it treatable?" Sarah met his eyes. "I don't know yet. We're still running tests." "But you've seen it before." "Yes." "Where?" "That's classified." "People are dying and you're worried about classification?" "I'm worried about preventing panic, which is what will happen if I start discussing military operations that officially never occurred." Vance closed her eyes. "This is a nightmare." "This is reality," Cross said. "Now, I need something from you. Dr. Webb made a decision tonight that delayed our containment response. I need to know why." Hastings shifted uncomfortably. "What are you implying?" "I'm not implying anything. I'm asking a direct question. Was there any reason Webb would have been motivated to keep the ER operational tonight despite a potential contamination risk?" Silence. Sarah looked around the table. "Someone answer him." Patricia Vance finally spoke. "We're hosting a fundraising gala tomorrow night. Major donors, board members, potential investors. The mayor's office is involved. We've been preparing for months. And Martin, Mr. Hastings, made it very clear that nothing could interfere with the event. No scandals, no disruptions, no bad press." Cross's expression hardened. "Did he communicate that to Dr. Webb?" I don't know." "Yes or no?" Hastings stood up again. "I had a private conversation with Dr. Webb 2 days ago. I reminded him that this hospital's future depends on securing new funding. I may have mentioned that any issues in the ER could reflect poorly on our readiness to expand. That's not a crime." "It is if it influenced his medical judgment." "You're twisting my words." Sarah felt something cold settle in her stomach. "You told him to keep the ER running no matter what." "I told him to maintain operational efficiency." "People are dead because of your operational efficiency." Hastings' face flushed. You have no proof of that. We have footage, Cross said quietly. Security cameras, audio recordings, everything. And if it shows that Webb delayed containment because of pressure from administration, you're looking at criminal negligence charges, maybe manslaughter. The room went silent. Roger looked like he might be sick. Oh God, this is bad. Vance was already on her feet. I'm advising everyone in this room to stop talking immediately. Do not say another word without legal counsel present. But Hastings wasn't done. You're bluffing. You don't have footage of anything. Cross smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. We've had surveillance on this hospital for 3 days. Every conversation, every call, every email. We knew something was coming. We just didn't know when or where. So yes, Mr. Hastings, we have footage, and it's going to bury you. Sarah watched the color drain from Hastings' face, watched him realize that his entire carefully constructed world was collapsing. Part of her felt satisfaction. The larger part just felt tired. Commander, she said quietly, we're wasting time. Cross nodded. Agreed. Sergeant Hayes will stay with you. He gestured to the soldiers outside. Nobody leaves this room. Nobody makes calls. If anyone tries, restrain them. They left the administrators sitting in stunned silence. In the hallway, Sarah grabbed Cross's arm. You've had surveillance on this hospital for 3 days? Yes. Were you watching me? We were watching everyone. That's not an answer. Cross stopped walking. Your name came up in the intelligence chatter. Someone mentioned that a former military medic with Kandahar experience was working at Riverside General. We flagged it, started monitoring. You used me as bait. We used available assets to prevent a catastrophic attack. I'm not an asset. I'm a person. Right now, you're the only person who can stop this thing from spreading, so which matters more, your feelings or their lives? Sarah wanted to hit him, wanted to scream, but he was right, and they both knew it. They returned to the ER in silence. The scene had changed. More equipment, more soldiers, more scared faces. Dennis had organized the exposed staff into groups based on symptom severity. Amanda was in decontamination. 2 others were being prepped for transport to an isolation unit. And in Trauma 3, a team of specialists in full hazmat gear were examining the dead patient, taking samples, running tests. Cross's radio crackled. Commander, we've got preliminary results from the blood work. Go ahead. It's a modified organophosphate compound, similar to the Kandahar agent, but with key differences. Faster acting, more virulent. Somebody engineered this thing to be worse. Sarah felt her stomach drop. Worse how? The voice on the radio paused. Traditional antidotes aren't working. We tried atropine, pralidoxime, standard nerve agent protocols. Nothing's touching it. Cross looked at Sarah. You ever see anything like this before? No. In Kandahar, the atropine worked. Not well, but it worked. If it's not working now, then we're in uncharted territory. A scream cut through the ER. Sarah spun around. One of the nurses, Kelly, a sweet kid from Iowa, who still brought homemade cookies to work, was convulsing on the floor. Blood poured from her nose. Her eyes rolled back. Dennis was already there, trying to stabilize her. I need help. She just collapsed. Sarah ran over, her training overriding her fear. She checked Kelly's airway, felt for a pulse. Thready, weak, getting weaker. Start a line. Push atropine anyway, maybe we'll get lucky. Dennis fumbled with the IV kit. His hands were shaking so badly he couldn't get the needle in. Dennis, breathe. I can't. She's dying. Then let me do it. Sarah took the kit, found a vein on the first try, got the line established. She pushed the atropine knowing it probably wouldn't work, but needing to try anyway. Kelly's convulsions slowed, then stopped. For a second, Sarah thought maybe the drug had worked. Then Kelly's heart monitor flatlined. No. Dennis started compressions. No, no, no. Sarah grabbed the crash cart. Charging to 200. Clear. The shock made Kelly's body arch off the floor. Nothing. Again, clear. Another shock. Nothing. Sarah looked at the monitor, looked at Kelly's face, looked at Dennis, who was crying now, still doing compressions even though they both knew it was over. Dennis, stop. She's 23 years old. I know. She just got engaged last month. I know, but she's gone. Dennis stopped. sat back on his heels, stared at his hands like they belonged to someone else. Around them, the ER had gone quiet. Everyone watching, everyone understanding that this could be them next. Sarah stood up slowly, her knees cracked. She looked at Cross. How many people were exposed? 49 total, including you. Symptoms in how many? 12 now, including the 2 fatalities. Sarah did the math. 25% symptomatic within the first hour. If the pattern held, they'd have another dozen casualties before dawn. We need to evacuate the symptomatic patients to a federal facility. Already arranged, transports inbound. What about the rest of the hospital? The patients on other floors? They stay in place. We can't risk moving them until we confirm containment. A young resident approached nervously. Excuse me, Lieutenant Mitchell? Sarah turned. Yeah. I'm Dr. Patel. I was here when the patient first came in. I touched him. You feeling okay? I think so, but I wanted to ask, is there anything we can do? Any treatment that might work? Sarah looked at this kid, couldn't be older than 27, asking a question she didn't have an answer for. We're working on it. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have right now. Patel nodded slowly. My fiancée is upstairs. She's a resident in cardiology. Can I call her just to let her know I'm okay? No calls, quarantine protocols? But she's going to be terrified. Everyone's terrified, Dr. Patel. That's what happens in situations like this. You deal with it. She walked away before she had to see the hurt in his eyes. Cross followed her to a quiet corner. You're doing good. I'm watching people die. You're keeping more people from dying. There's a difference. Sarah leaned against the wall. Every muscle in her body ached. Kandahar was supposed to be the end of this. We burned the facility, destroyed the samples, filed reports saying the program was terminated. Clearly, someone didn't get the memo. Or someone kept samples we didn't know about. Cross's expression shifted. You think this is an inside job? I think this agent didn't just appear out of nowhere. Someone with access to classified research created this. Someone with resources deployed it. And someone chose this hospital specifically. Why here? I don't know, but it's not random. Nothing about this is random. Cross's radio crackled again. Commander, we've got a situation. Front entrance, you need to see this. They hurried to the main lobby. Through the glass doors, Sarah could see a crowd gathering outside the quarantine perimeter. News vans, protesters, people holding signs, and cameras. So many cameras. How did they find out? Cross demanded. One of his soldiers looked uncomfortable. Someone inside leaked it. Social media post before we confiscated phones. It's already gone viral. On a nearby television, still broadcasting despite the lockdown, Sarah saw her own face on the screen. An old photo from her military days. Younger, sharper, wearing a uniform she'd tried to forget. The news anchor's voice carried across the lobby. Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, formerly of a classified U.S. Army unit, is reportedly leading the response to what sources describe as a possible bioterror attack at Riverside General Hospital in Minneapolis. Cross swore. They're not supposed to have that information. Well, they have it now, Sarah said quietly. The broadcast continued. Mitchell was dishonorably discharged following a controversial incident in 2019, details of which remain classified. That's not true, Sarah said. I resigned. There's a difference. Cross didn't respond. Ethan, tell me they didn't leak that on purpose. His silence was answer enough. Sarah felt something break inside her. You used me. You leaked my name to draw someone out. We leaked a partial story to flesh out whoever's behind this. Yes. Without asking me. Would you have agreed? No. Then I made the call, and I'd make it again. Sarah looked at him, really looked at him, and saw a stranger wearing a familiar face. You haven't changed at all, have you? Neither have you. You're still trying to save everyone even when it costs you everything. At least I'm trying. Before Cross could respond, the lights went out. Not the emergency lights. All lights. The ER plunged into darkness, broken only by the glow of battery-powered monitors. Someone screamed. Sarah's hand went to her belt, reaching for equipment that wasn't there anymore. Old habits. Cross pulled a flashlight from his vest. "Report," one of his soldiers called back. "Main power's down. Backup generators should kick in." They didn't. 30 seconds of darkness. Then a minute. The emergency exit signs flickered weakly, but provided almost no illumination. "This is a problem," Cross said quietly. Sarah's eyes adjusted slowly. She could make out shapes now, people huddled together, equipment casting strange shadows. And then she heard it. A sound from somewhere deeper in the hospital. Mechanical. Rhythmic. Footsteps. Someone was walking through the darkened hallways, walking toward the ER. Heavy boots on tile. Getting closer. Cross raised his rifle. "Identify yourself." No answer. The footsteps continued, steady, unhurried. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. This wasn't part of the containment team. Cross's people were all accounted for. The footsteps stopped just outside the ER entrance. A figure stood silhouetted against the dim glow of the exit sign. Cross's flashlight beam found the face. Sarah's blood turned to ice. She knew that face. Major Victor Kane, the man who'd led the Kandahar operation, the man who'd ordered her to breach the storage facility, the man who'd walked away clean while she'd taken the fall. And he was smiling. "Sarah." Kane's voice carried across the darkened ER like he was greeting an old friend at a barbecue. "You're looking well. Civilian life agrees with you." Cross's rifle didn't waver. "Major Kane, you're in a federal quarantine zone. Identify your authorization or you will be detained." Kane stepped into the ER, hands loose at his sides. He wore civilian clothes, dark jacket, jeans, boots, but he moved like military. Still had that same predatory confidence Sarah remembered from Kandahar. "I have authorization," Kane said, "just not the kind you're cleared to see." 3 more figures emerged from the darkness behind him. Armed, professional, not part of Cross's team, Cross's soldiers immediately raised their weapons. "On the ground, now!" Kane didn't even flinch. "Commander Cross, I'd advise your men to lower their weapons before this turns into an international incident." "International?" Cross's voice was tight. "What the hell are you talking about?" Kane pulled out a phone, somehow still working despite the communications blackout, and held it up. The screen showed a document with official seals Sarah recognized. Department of Defense, National Security Council. Clearance levels that made Cross's authorization look like a library card. "I'm here under Executive Protocol 17, Kane said, "which means I outrank everyone in this building, including you." Sarah's mind raced. Executive Protocol 17 was a black operations designation. It meant Kane was operating outside normal chains of command. It meant he had permission to do things that would never appear in any official record. It meant he was untouchable. Cross lowered his rifle slowly. His team followed suit, but they didn't relax. "Sir, I need to verify." "You can verify whatever you want after we've secured the contamination source. Right now, I'm taking control of this operation." Kane's eyes found Sarah in the dim light. "And I'm going to need Lieutenant Mitchell to come with me." "No," Sarah said. Kane smiled. "I wasn't asking. I don't care what your authorization says. I'm not going anywhere with you." "Sarah, we both know how this works. You can cooperate, or I can have my team sedate you and carry you out. Either way, you're coming." Cross stepped between them. "Major, with all due respect, Lieutenant Mitchell is currently serving as incident commander for this contamination event. Removing her could result in additional casualties." "Then I guess we'd better work quickly." Kane gestured to one of his team members. "Daniels, prep the transport. We're leaving in 5 minutes." Sarah felt the walls closing in. This was Kandahar all over again. Kane giving orders that didn't make sense. People dying because he was more concerned with protecting secrets than protecting lives. "What are you really doing here?" she asked quietly. Kane's smile faded. "Cleaning up a mess. Same as always." "Whose mess? Does it matter?" "It matters to the people dying in this ER. Those people were always going to die, Sarah. The moment that patient walked through those doors, their fate was sealed. Now we're just deciding how many more join them." Dennis appeared from the darkness, his face illuminated by a handheld monitor. "Sarah, we've got 3 more showing symptoms. Respiratory distress, muscle spasms. I don't know how much longer—" Kane interrupted. "You're Dennis Hale, charge nurse. 15 years at this hospital. Wife named Margaret. 2 kids in middle school. Dennis froze. How do you know that? I know everything about everyone in this building, including the fact that you touched the contaminated patient for approximately 47 seconds when he first arrived. Which means you've been exposed, which means you're running out of time. The ER went silent. Dennis looked at Sarah. Is that true? Sarah wanted to lie. Wanted to tell him he'd be fine. But she'd already lied to enough people tonight. Yeah, it's true. Dennis's face crumpled. Oh, God. Margaret, the kids, I can't. Dennis, look at me. Sarah grabbed his shoulders. We're working on a treatment. Cross's team has scientists analyzing the compound right now. There's still time. No, there isn't. Kane's voice was flat. The modified agent has a 100% fatality rate among exposed individuals. No exceptions, no survivors. The best you can do is make them comfortable before the end. Sarah turned on him. You're lying. Am I? Run the numbers yourself. Kandahar had a 73% fatality rate with immediate treatment. This version is engineered to be more lethal. Do the math. Cross's radio crackled. One of his scientists. Commander, we've completed the genetic sequencing. Major Kane is correct. The modifications to the original compound have eliminated all known treatment pathways. I'm sorry. The words hung in the air like poison gas. Dennis backed away slowly, shaking his head. No, this isn't happening. Sarah tried to reach for him, but he jerked away. Don't touch me. I don't want to contaminate you too. Dennis, just let me go. Let me call my wife. Let me say goodbye. He stumbled toward the decontamination area, moving like a man already dead. Sarah turned back to Kane, fury burning through her shock. You knew this was going to happen. I knew something was going to happen. The specifics were classified above my clearance until about 6 hours ago. Bullshit. You're up to your neck in this. Kane stepped closer. Careful, Sarah. You're making accusations you can't prove. I can prove you were in Kandahar. I can prove you ordered me to breach that storage facility. I can prove you walked away clean while I got destroyed. And none of that matters anymore. What matters is that we have a weaponized agent loose in a civilian hospital, and the only person who knows the original compound well enough to potentially develop a counteragent is standing right in front of me. So we can either stand here arguing about the past, or we can try to save the future. Your choice. Sarah hated that he was right. Hated that after everything he'd done, she still needed to work with him. What do you need? She asked through gritted teeth. Your notes from Kandahar. Everything you remember about the original compound. Molecular structure, reaction patterns, exposure timelines. We've got a team waiting at Fort Meade who can cross-reference with our updated data. Those notes are classified. Not anymore. As of 2 hours ago, Kandahar has been declassified under emergency authorization, which means you can talk freely without violating your NDA. Sarah felt something shift in her chest. 6 years of silence, 6 years of carrying secrets that had eaten her alive, and now they were telling her it was okay to speak. Why now? She asked. Why declassify now? Kane's expression was unreadable. Because someone leaked the Kandahar files 3 weeks ago, posted them online. By the time our cyber team scrubbed the data, it had already been downloaded approximately 40,000 times. The cat's out of the bag, Sarah. Might as well use it to our advantage. Cross looked like he'd been punched. The Kandahar files are public? Heavily redacted versions, yes, enough to cause problems, not enough to be useful. Who leaked them? We're still investigating. Sarah knew a lie when she heard one. You know exactly who leaked them. You're just not saying. Kane didn't deny it. Amanda appeared from the decontamination area, her face pale but composed. I heard what you said about the fatality rate. Is it true? Kane looked at her like she was a math problem he'd already solved. Yes. How long do we have? Depends on your exposure level. Could be hours. Could be minutes. That's not helpful. It's honest. Amanda turned to Sarah. What do you want me to do? Sarah felt her throat tighten. Go be with your family. Make your calls. We'll keep fighting, but you should say what you need to say. Amanda nodded slowly. Then she did something Sarah didn't expect. She hugged her. Thank you for trying, Amanda whispered. Then she walked away, pulling out the phone Cross's team had confiscated earlier, dialing with shaking hands. Kane watched her go. Sentimental. Human, Sarah shot back. Same thing. The power suddenly surged back on, fluorescent lights blazing after the darkness. Everyone blinked and squinted like cave animals seeing sunlight for the first time. And in the sudden illumination, Sarah saw something she'd missed in the dark. Kane's hands were shaking, just slightly, a tremor he was trying to hide. "You're exposed," she said quietly. Kane's jaw tightened. "Observant as always." "When? Does it matter?" "It matters if you're about to collapse in the middle of this operation. I'll last long enough to get what we need." Kane pulled out a syringe from his jacket pocket. Clear liquid. "Experimental treatment. Won't cure anything, but it'll buy me a few hours. Maybe." He jabbed the needle into his thigh without hesitation, pushed the plunger, grimaced. Cross stared at him. "Sir, if you're compromised, I'm compromised the moment I stepped into this building. We all are. The question is whether we accomplish the mission before we die." "What mission?" Sarah demanded. "Stop talking in riddles and tell us what's actually happening." Kane pulled the needle out, dropped it in a sharps container. 3 weeks ago, someone stole samples from a black site research facility in Virginia. We thought it was industrial espionage. Figured they'd try to sell it to a hostile nation. But then the intelligence chatter started mentioning domestic targets, hospitals, schools, public spaces. "You're telling me this is terrorism?" "I'm telling you this is worse than terrorism. Terrorism has a political goal. This is just chaos for its own sake. We don't even know who's behind it. No demands. No manifesto. Just deployment." Sarah felt sick. "How many other targets?" "We've identified 6 potential sites. This is the first confirmed attack, which means we have maybe 48 hours to develop a response before the others activate." "And you think my notes can help?" "Your notes are the only comprehensive field data we have on the original compound. Everything else was destroyed or classified beyond retrieval. So, yes, I think they can help. I think they're the only thing that can help." Sarah looked around the ER, at Dennis, who was crying while talking to his wife on the phone, at Amanda, saying goodbye to her mother, at Dr. Patel, holding the hand of a nurse who couldn't stop shaking, at Cross, who looked like he was watching his entire career collapse in real time, and at Kane, who'd orchestrated her destruction 6 years ago and was now asking her to save the world he'd helped break. "The notes are in my apartment," she said finally, "locked in a safe. I kept copies even though I wasn't supposed to." Kane almost smiled. "Of course you did. But I'm not giving them to you. I'm coming with you to Fort Meade. I'm working with your team directly. And when this is over, I want answers, real answers, about Kandahar, about who gave the orders, about why I was the only one who paid the price." "You're in no position to negotiate." "Actually, I'm in the only position to negotiate. You need what's in my head more than what's on paper. The notes are incomplete. There are things I remember that I never wrote down. So either I come with you, or you get nothing." Kane studied her face. "You've gotten harder. I've gotten tired of being pushed around." He nodded slowly. "Daniels, prep 2 transports. Mitchell's coming with us." "Sir, the quarantine is secondary to mission-critical objectives. We move now." Cross stepped forward. "Major, I can't authorize—" "You don't have to authorize anything. Your role here is to maintain containment and manage casualties. Mine is to prevent this from happening 5 more times. Stay in your lane, Commander." Cross looked like he wanted to argue, but he didn't, because Kane was right, and they both knew it. Sarah turned to Dennis. "I have to go, but Cross's team will take care of you, all of you." Dennis looked up from his phone, tears streaming down his face. "Will it hurt at the end?" Sarah wanted to lie, couldn't. "I don't know, I hope not." "That's not comforting." "Nothing about this is comforting." He laughed bitterly. "You know what the worst part is? I always thought I'd die doing something heroic, saving a patient, running into a burning building, something that mattered. Instead, I'm dying because some asshole with a political agenda decided to play God with chemicals I can't even pronounce." "You matter," Sarah said quietly. "Every person in this room matters. And I'm going to make sure whoever did this pays for it." Dennis wiped his eyes. "You promise?" "Yeah, I promise." Kane's team was already moving toward the exit. Sarah followed, but Cross caught her arm. "Be careful," he said quietly. "Kane's got his own agenda. Don't trust anything he says." "I don't trust anyone anymore." Good. Keep it that way. They moved through the hospital corridors, past confused patients and terrified staff. The quarantine was still in effect, but Kane's team had clearance to override the locks. Doors opened automatically as they approached. Outside, 2 black helicopters sat on the hospital's rooftop helipad. Military grade. Fast. Kane climbed into the first one. Sarah followed. The interior smelled like jet fuel and old coffee. 4 other people already inside. Scientists, probably, based on the laptops and equipment cases. They looked at Sarah with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. 40-minute flight to Meade, Kane said over the engine noise. Use the time to organize your thoughts. My team's going to want everything you remember, and they're going to want it fast. The helicopter lifted off. Through the window, Sarah could see Riverside General shrinking below them, red emergency lights still flashing, news vans circling like vultures, protesters at the barricades holding signs she couldn't read from this height. Her entire life was down there, her apartment, her routines, her carefully constructed anonymity, and she was leaving it behind to help the man who'd destroyed her. One of the scientists leaned forward. Lieutenant Mitchell, I'm Dr. Reeves. I've read your original Kandahar reports, at least the parts that weren't redacted. Your documentation of the compound's behavioral patterns was remarkable. Thanks. Can I ask you something? Sure. In your report, you mentioned that the agent seemed to target specific physiological markers, almost like it was designed to affect certain genetic profiles more severely than others. Did you ever follow up on that observation? Sarah frowned. I tried, but my clearance was revoked before I could run the genetic analysis. Reeves glanced at Kane, then back to Sarah. The current version shows the same selectivity, only it's been enhanced. We're seeing differential mortality rates based on genetic markers we don't fully understand yet. Meaning? Meaning someone's weaponizing biology in a way we've never seen before. They're not just trying to kill people. They're trying to kill specific people. Sarah felt cold. Like who? That's what we're trying to figure out. But the pattern suggests Ispawn. Kane cut in sharply. Reeves, save it for the debrief. Reeves shut up immediately. But Sarah had already heard enough. Someone was engineering death with precision, targeting victims based on their DNA. And Kane didn't want her asking questions about it. The helicopter banked hard, changing direction. Sarah looked out the window and saw they were heading northeast instead of south toward Fort Meade. Where are we going? She asked. Kane didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was careful. Change of plans. We're heading to a secure facility in upstate New York. Fort Meade's been compromised. Compromised how? That's classified. Everything's classified with you. Welcome to Black Operations. Sarah looked around at the other passengers. They didn't seem surprised by the course change, which meant they'd known about it before they got on the helicopter, which meant Kane had lied. We're not going to a lab, are we? Sarah said quietly. Kane met her eyes. We're going somewhere safe. That's not an answer. It's the only answer you're getting right now. Sarah's hand moved to her seatbelt. Land this helicopter. Not happening. I said land it. Now. And I said not happening. You agreed to cooperate, so cooperate. I agreed to help develop a treatment. I didn't agree to be kidnapped. Kane sighed. You're not being kidnapped. You're being protected. From what? From the people who leaked the Kandahar files. From the people who deployed this agent. From the people who've been watching you for the last 3 weeks, waiting for exactly this moment. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. What are you talking about? Kane pulled out his phone again, showed her a series of photos. Sarah in her apartment. Sarah walking to her car. Sarah buying groceries. All taken from a distance, all within the last month. You've been under surveillance, Kane said. Not by us, by someone else. Someone who knew you'd recognize the agent. Someone who knew you'd get pulled into the response. Someone who's been planning this for a very long time. Who? We don't know yet, but we know they want you, and we're not going to give them the satisfaction. Sarah stared at the photos, her privacy stripped away, her life exposed. So what happens now? She asked. Kane's expression was unreadable. Now you disappear. New identity, new location, new life. You help us develop the counteragent, and then you vanish. It's the only way to keep you alive. I don't want to disappear. I don't care what you want. I care about preventing 5 more Riverside Generals. And after? After we stop the other attacks, what then? Then you stay disappeared. Forever. Sarah felt the walls closing in. You're putting me in witness protection. Something like that. Without asking me. Without needing to ask you. Executive Protocol 17 gives me the authority to relocate key assets without consent if their safety is compromised. I'm not an asset. In this situation, that's exactly what you are. Sarah looked out the window at the darkness rushing past below. Thought about Dennis dying in that ER. About Amanda saying goodbye to her mother. About Kelly, 23 years old, engaged, dead on the floor. About all the people who'd die in the next attacks if she didn't help. And about the fact that helping meant losing everything she had left. Do I get to say goodbye? She asked quietly. To anyone. Kane shook his head. Goodbyes leave trails. Trails get people killed. So I just vanish. You just vanish. Sarah closed her eyes. I hate you. I know. The helicopter flew on through the night. 30 minutes later, they landed on a remote airfield somewhere in the mountains. No buildings visible. Just trees and darkness and a single black van waiting on the tarmac. Kane's team hustled Sarah into the van. No explanations. No delays. They drove for another hour on unmarked roads. Sarah lost track of the turns. Lost track of time. Just sat in the darkness and tried not to think about the fact that her life was over. Finally, they stopped. The van doors opened. A concrete bunker loomed in front of them, built into the side of a mountain. Serious security. Armed guards, biometric scanners. Welcome to Site 17, Kane said. Your new home for the foreseeable future. They led her inside. Through checkpoints, through corridors that smelled like recycled air and government secrets. Into a conference room where 6 people sat waiting. Sarah recognized 2 of them immediately. Dr. Patricia Vance, the hospital's legal counsel, and Martin Hastings, the hospital director. They were alive. Unharmed, sitting at the table like they'd been expecting her. What the hell is this? Sarah demanded. Hastings smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. Lieutenant Mitchell, so glad you could join us. Kane pulled out a chair. Sit down, Sarah. Not until someone tells me what's going on. Sit. Down. Something in his voice made her obey. She sat. Hastings leaned back in his chair. Let me guess. Major Kane told you this was about preventing future attacks, about developing a counteragent, about protecting you from mysterious enemies. Sarah didn't answer. All true, Hastings continued, but incomplete. You see, Sarah, you're not just here to help stop this. You're here because you're the reason it started. That's insane. Is it? Tell me, how did you recognize the symptoms so quickly? How did you know exactly what to look for? How did you identify a modified nerve agent within minutes when it should have taken hours of laboratory analysis? Because I'd seen it before. In Kandahar. Yes? Kandahar. Where you were the sole survivor of a contamination event. Where you somehow managed to avoid exposure while 17 others died. Where you gave testimony that contradicted physical evidence. Where you walked away with barely a scratch while your entire unit was destroyed. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. Are you accusing me of something? I'm stating facts. You survived Kandahar. You kept unauthorized copies of classified research. You've been living under an assumed identity. Oh, yes, we know about that. In a city randomly targeted for a bioweapon attack. Quite a coincidence. Kane spoke quietly. Sarah, we need you to tell us the truth. Did you have any contact with anyone from Kandahar in the last 6 months? No. Any unusual communications? Messages from unknown sources, packages delivered to your apartment? No. Any reason to believe someone might want to frame you for this attack? Sarah's mind raced. Wait, you think I'm a suspect? Hastings smiled again. We think you're either a suspect or a patsy. Either way, you're involved, and we need to know which one it is before we let you anywhere near our counteragent research. Sarah looked at Kane. You said you were protecting me. I am. From them. He gestured to Hastings. They wanted to arrest you immediately. I convinced them to bring you here instead, to give you a chance to prove your innocence. How generous. It's more than you deserve if you're guilty. I'm not guilty. Then prove it. One of the other people at the table, a woman Sarah didn't recognize, pushed a folder across the surface. Inside, you'll find evidence we've compiled over the last 3 weeks. Phone records, financial transactions, surveillance footage, all pointing to your involvement in the theft of biological samples from the Virginia facility. Sarah opened the folder with shaking hands. Bank deposits she didn't make, phone calls she didn't place, photos of her meeting with people she'd never seen before, all fabricated, all convincing, all designed to destroy her. "This is fake," she whispered. "Can you prove that?" Hastings asked. "Can you prove it's real?" "We don't have to. The burden of proof is on you." Sarah looked up at Kane. You knew they were setting me up and you brought me here anyway." Kane's expression was unreadable. "I brought you here because it was the only way to keep you alive long enough to clear your name. If you'd stayed at Riverside, they would have arrested you within the hour. At least here, you have a chance." "A chance to what? To prove I didn't do something I obviously didn't do?" "Welcome to Black Operations. Nothing's ever obvious." The woman who'd pushed the folder spoke up. "Lieutenant Mitchell, we're willing to offer you a deal. Cooperate fully with our investigation. Provide all information you have about Kandahar. Submit to enhanced interrogation if necessary. And if you're truly innocent, you'll walk away from this." "Enhanced interrogation? You mean torture?" "We mean getting to the truth through all available means." Sarah stood up. "I'm done. I'm not saying another word without a lawyer." Hastings laughed. "You don't get a lawyer. You're in a black site facility under national security protocols. You have no rights here." "Everyone has rights." "Not everyone. Not you. Not anymore." Sarah looked around the room, at the faces staring back at her with suspicion and contempt, at Kane, who'd betrayed her twice now, at the folder full of lies that would follow her forever. And she made a decision. "Fine," she said quietly. "You want the truth? I'll give you the truth. But not here. Not like this." Kane frowned. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that someone in this room is working with whoever deployed that agent. Someone fed you fake evidence. Someone's been running interference to make sure the investigation points at me instead of them. And I'm going to prove it." Hastings' smile faded. "That's a serious accusation. Good thing I have serious evidence." Sarah pulled out her phone, the one she'd kept hidden in her jacket pocket, the one Kane's team hadn't confiscated because they thought she didn't have it. She held it up, screen glowing. "I've been recording everything since you picked me up, every word, every lie, every admission, and I just sent the file to someone who will make sure it sees the light of day if anything happens to me." Kane's face went pale. "Sarah, what did you do?" "What I should have done 6 years ago. I protected myself." The room erupted into chaos. Guards rushing forward, Hastings shouting, the woman demanding Sarah's phone. But Sarah was faster. She threw the phone across the room. It shattered against the wall. And in the confusion, she grabbed the folder, tucked it under her arm, and ran. Out the door, down the corridor, alarms blaring behind her. She didn't know where she was going, didn't have a plan, just knew she couldn't stay there, couldn't let them win, couldn't disappear again. Behind her, Kane's voice echoed through the bunker. "Lock it down! Nobody leaves! Find her now!" Sarah ran faster, her heart hammering, her breath burning, her mind screaming that this was insane. But she'd been called insane before, and she'd survived. She'd survive this too. The corridor ended at a heavy metal door. No handle, just a biometric scanner. Sarah slammed her fist against it in frustration. The door clicked, swung open. Someone stood on the other side. A woman, 50, gray hair, familiar face. Sarah's breath caught. Dr. Helen Marsh, the lead researcher from Kandahar. The woman who'd been killed in the contamination event. The woman whose body Sarah had identified herself. The woman who was supposed to be dead. Marsh smiled. "Hello, Sarah. We've been waiting for you." Sarah's body moved before her brain caught up. She swung the folder hard, catching Marsh across the face. The older woman stumbled back with a surprised grunt. Sarah didn't wait. She shoved past her, through the doorway, into whatever space lay beyond. A laboratory, massive. State-of-the-art equipment that made Riverside General's ER look like a high school science class. Centrifuges, spectroscopy machines, sealed containment units glowing with biohazard warnings. And in the center of it all, a glass chamber. Inside the chamber, strapped to a medical bed, was the kid from the ER, the gunshot victim, the one who died. Except he wasn't dead. His chest rose and fell. Monitors tracked his vitals. IV lines ran into both arms. "What the hell?" Sarah breathed. Marsh recovered, straightening her glasses. Blood trickled from her nose, but she didn't seem bothered. Impressive reaction time. Military training really does stick with you. You're supposed to be dead. So are you, technically, at least according to the official Kandahar reports. Marsh walked further into the lab, moving like she owned the place. Funny how death certificates can be flexible when you have the right connections. Sarah's mind raced through the implications. Kandahar was staged. Parts of it. The contamination event was real enough. 17 people really did die. But the source wasn't an accident. It was a field test. A field test of what? Marsh gestured around the laboratory. Of how well the compound worked. Of who could survive exposure. Of what genetic markers predicted resistance. She paused. Of whether you specifically would survive. Sarah felt sick. You targeted me. We selected you. There's a difference. You had the right genetic profile, the right psychological profile, the right combination of competence and expendability. Marsh pulled up a holographic display showing DNA sequences Sarah didn't recognize. You were our proof of concept. For what? For creating the perfect soldier. Someone who could operate in contaminated environments. Someone whose body could metabolize nerve agents and biological weapons. Someone who could walk through hell and come out clean on the other side. Sarah looked at the kid in the glass chamber. And him? Subject 17, our latest iteration. We exposed him to the modified compound 6 hours ago. He should have been dead in 20 minutes, but his genetic modifications are holding. He's fighting it. You're experimenting on people. We're advancing human evolution. There's a difference. No, there really isn't. Marsh smiled. It was the smile of someone who believed their own justifications. Sarah, do you know how many soldiers die every year from chemical exposure, from biological attacks, from environmental hazards we can't predict or prevent? Thousands. But if we could engineer resistance directly into the human genome, we could save all of them. By killing civilians in a Minneapolis hospital? By field testing under real-world conditions. Laboratory data only tells you so much. We needed to see how the compound performed in an uncontrolled environment, how quickly it spread, how medical personnel would respond, how containment protocols would hold up. You murdered people to collect data. We sacrificed a few to save millions. That's the calculation we make every day in this business. Sarah's fist connected with Marsh's jaw before she'd consciously decided to throw the punch. The older woman went down hard, her head cracking against a metal cabinet. Sarah stood over her, breathing hard. I'm not your experiment. I'm not your proof of concept. I'm a person. And so were those 17 people in Kandahar. And so were Dennis and Amanda and Kelly and everyone else dying in that ER right now. Marsh wiped blood from her mouth. You're right. You're not an experiment anymore. You're the success story. You survived Kandahar with 0 long-term effects. You metabolized a compound that should have killed you. Your body adapted, and we need to know why. So you can replicate it. So we can weaponize it. The door behind them burst open. Kane and 4 armed soldiers, weapons raised, faces grim. Kane took in the scene. Dr. Marsh. I should have known. Marsh stood slowly, still smiling despite the blood. Major Kane, cutting it close, aren't you? I expected you 5 minutes ago. Traffic was bad. Kane's gun didn't waver. Sarah, step away from her. Sarah didn't move. You knew about all of this? You knew she was alive. I suspected. I didn't know for sure until tonight. Bullshit. You were part of this from the beginning. Kane's expression flickered. I followed orders, same as you. No, I tried to save people. You helped kill them. Semantics, Marsh laughed. Oh, this is delicious. Sarah, did Kane tell you why he really brought you here? It wasn't to protect you. It wasn't to develop a counteragent. It was to see if you'd lead us straight to me. Sarah looked at Kane. Is that true? His silence was answer enough. We knew Dr. Marsh had gone rogue, he said finally. We knew she'd taken the research underground. We knew she was planning something big, but we didn't know where she was operating from. So we set a trap. We let the Riverside attack happen. We waited for you to recognize the compound. We brought you here knowing Marsh would make contact. You used me as bait. I used you as an asset. Like I said, there's a difference. Stop saying that. Stop treating people like chess pieces you can sacrifice. Kane's jaw tightened. This is war, Sarah. People die in war. The question is whether their deaths mean something. They don't mean anything if you're the one killing them. Marsh clapped slowly. Wonderful. Such passion, such moral clarity. Tell me, Sarah, when you kept those classified notes, when you violated your NDA, when you built a new life based on lies and omissions, did you feel morally superior then? Or is self-righteousness a recent development? Sarah turned on her. I kept those notes because I knew someone would try to cover this up. I knew people like you would twist the truth. I knew I needed evidence. Evidence you never used, evidence you hid in a safe and tried to forget about. So really, you're just as complicit as the rest of us. I'm nothing like you. No? Then why are you still alive? Why did you survive when 17 others died? Luck? Skill? Or maybe, just maybe, because on some level you wanted to survive more than you wanted to save them. The words hit like bullets. Sarah felt them puncture something deep inside her chest. Because part of her had always wondered the same thing. Marsh pressed her advantage. You were in the clean room when the canister ruptured. You had 30 seconds to make a choice. Breach the containment to help your team or seal it and save yourself. You chose yourself. Don't pretend otherwise. I followed protocol. You followed your survival instinct. Same as everyone else. See, same as Kane, same as me. The only difference is we're honest about it. Kane's radio crackled. Sir, we've got movement on the perimeter, multiple hostiles. They're coming in fast. Kane swore. How many? At least 20, maybe more. They're armed and they know the layout. Marsh's smile widened. Did you really think I was working alone? Did you think Site 17 was the only facility? We have resources you can't imagine, funding from sources that don't appear on any budget, personnel who officially don't exist. Who's funding you, Pabot? Sarah demanded. People who understand that the future belongs to whoever controls human evolution. Governments, corporations, philanthropists, anyone with vision and resources. The lights cut out again. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. Kane grabbed Sarah's arm. We need to move, now. Sarah pulled free. I'm not going anywhere with you. They'll kill you if you stay. Maybe that's better than becoming whatever you people want me to be. Sarah. An explosion rocked the facility. Dust rained from the ceiling. Alarms screamed. Marsh was already moving toward a side exit. Good luck, Major. You're going to need it. Kane shot at her. The bullet sparked off the door frame as Marsh disappeared through it. Damn it! Kane turned to his team. Split up. 2 with me. 2 secure the subject. Nobody leaves this facility alive unless I authorize it. The soldiers moved with practiced efficiency. Kane dragged Sarah toward the opposite exit. Let go of me. Not happening. You're the only leverage I have left. They burst into another corridor. This one was narrower, older. Service tunnels beneath the main facility. Gunfire erupted behind them. Shouts, screams. The sound of Kane's team engaging Marsh's people. Kane pulled Sarah faster. There's an emergency exit half a mile ahead. Leads to the surface. We get there, we get extraction, we get out. And then what? And then I figure out how to salvage this disaster. It's not salvageable. You killed civilians. You ran illegal experiments. You covered up war crimes. The best you can hope for is life in prison instead of execution. Kane stopped, turned to face her. You think I don't know that? You think I sleep at night? I've made choices, Sarah, bad choices. Choices I'll answer for eventually, but right now the only thing that matters is stopping Marsh before she releases that compound in 5 more cities. Why would she do that? Because she's not testing anymore. She's demonstrating. She's showing potential buyers what the compound can do. Riverside was her sales pitch. The other 5 targets are her product launch. Sarah felt the floor tilt. When? 24 hours. Maybe less. Where? We don't know. That's why we needed you to lead us to her. That's why we... He didn't finish the sentence because a figure stepped out of the shadows ahead of them. Dr. Patel, the young resident from Riverside General. He was holding a gun. Dr. Patel? Sarah's voice was hoarse. What are you doing here? Patel's hands shook, but his aim was steady. I'm sorry, Lieutenant Mitchell, I really am. But they have my fiancée. They said if I didn't cooperate, they'd expose her to the compound. I can't let that happen. Kane raised his weapon. Son, you don't want to do this. I don't have a choice. There's always a choice. Easy to say when it's not someone you love. Sarah stepped forward. Patel, listen to me. These people are lying. They're not going to let your fiancé go. Once you're no longer useful, they'll kill both of you. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Because that's what they do. That's what they did to me in Kandahar. That's what they're doing to you now. Patel's gun wavered. They said if I brought you to them, she'd be safe. They lied. But what if they didn't? What if there's even a chance? Kane shot him. The bullet hit Patel in the shoulder. He went down hard, his gun skittering across the floor. Sarah screamed, "What the hell?" He was going to shoot you. He was a kid. He was scared. He was compromised. That makes him a threat. Sarah knelt beside Patel. He was conscious, groaning, clutching his shoulder. Blood seeped between his fingers. "I'm sorry," he gasped. "I'm so sorry." Sarah pulled off her jacket, pressed it against the wound. "Where's your fiancée? Where are they holding her?" "I don't know. They just showed me a photo, proof of life. They said if I didn't—" He coughed. Blood flecked his lips. "They said you were the one who created this, that you were trying to release it. I believed them." "I know. It's okay." "It's not okay. Nothing about this is okay." Kane's radio crackled again. "Sir, we've lost contact with the containment team. Repeat, containment team is not responding." Kane closed his eyes. "Copy. Fall back to the extraction point. Authorization Delta 7. "Sir, what about the subject?" "Leave him. We can't risk—" The radio died. Just static. Kane threw it against the wall. "Damn it!" Sarah looked up at him. "Your team's gone. Marsh has the facility, and we're trapped down here with a gunshot victim who needs medical attention. So what's your brilliant plan now, Major?" Kane didn't answer. He was staring at something behind her. Sarah turned. The corridor walls were lined with monitors she hadn't noticed in the red emergency lighting. They were flickering to life now, showing different locations throughout the facility. And on one of them, Sarah saw Riverside General. The ER, still in lockdown. Still lit by red emergency lighting. But something was different. Dennis was standing, walking, talking to Cross like nothing was wrong. Amanda was laughing with another nurse. Kelly, who died in Sarah's arms, was checking a patient's vitals. They were all alive, all healthy, all fine. "What?" Sarah's voice failed. The monitors switched to different feeds, hospital administration, security footage, timestamps. They showed Webb receiving a phone call 3 hours before the trauma patient arrived, showed him nodding, showed him making notes. They showed Hastings in his office, talking to someone off camera, smiling, shaking hands. They showed Cross arriving at the hospital 6 hours before the attack, not responding to an emergency, arriving early, setting up surveillance. The entire thing had been staged. Sarah stood slowly, Patel's blood on her hands, her mind fracturing around the impossibility of what she was seeing. Kane spoke quietly. "They're not dead, Sarah. None of them are dead. But you saw what we wanted you to see. The seizures, the collapses, the symptoms, all simulated. The fatality rate was part of the scenario. We needed you to believe it was real. Needed you to react like it was real. Needed you scared and desperate and willing to help." Sarah couldn't breathe. "Why?" "Because we needed to confirm you weren't working with Marsh, needed to see if you'd recognize the compound, needed to verify your resistance markers were still active, needed to know if you were an asset or a liability." "By making me watch people die?" "By making you think you were watching people die. There's a difference." "Stop saying that," Sarah's voice broke. "Stop saying there's a difference when you're just splitting hairs to justify torture. It wasn't torture, it was an operational necessity. It was psychological warfare against someone who'd already been destroyed by this program once." Kane had the decency to look away. "I'm sorry, for what it's worth, I'm sorry." "It's not worth anything," Patel groaned. "Am I going to die?" "No," Sarah said. "The bullet went through clean. You'll be fine." "My shoulder doesn't feel fine." "It will, eventually." On the monitors, the feed switched again. this time showing the conference room where Hastings had accused Sarah of being involved. Except now the camera angle was different, wider, and Sarah could see what she'd missed before. The whole confrontation had been filmed. Professional equipment, multiple angles, lighting setups. They'd been recording her reaction, testing her, all of it, every moment since Kane had shown up at Riverside. Every word, every decision, every desperate choice. All of it had been a test, and she'd failed in ways she didn't even understand yet. "So what now?" she asked. "You've confirmed I'm not working with Marsh. You've verified my resistance. You've collected your data. What happens to me?" Kane holstered his weapon. "Now we finish what we started. We stop Marsh. We prevent the other attacks, and we make sure this program never happens again." "By doing what?" "By exposing it. All of it. Kandahar, the genetic research, the illegal testing, the whole network." Sarah stared at him. "You're lying." "No, for once I'm telling you the truth. This has gone too far. Marsh went rogue, but she's not the only one. There's a whole network of people funding this research, using it, profiting from it, and they need to be stopped." "Why should I believe you?" "Because I'm giving you a choice. Help me take them down. Use your notes. Use your knowledge. Use your survival as evidence. Or walk away. Disappear. Live whatever life you can build with the pieces they left you." Sarah looked at the monitors, at the lies stacked on lies, at the manipulation and the staged deaths and the casual cruelty of people who thought they were saving the world. And she made her decision. "I want immunity. Full immunity. Written and signed by someone who can actually enforce it. Done. I want the truth about Kandahar made public. All of it. No redactions, no classified sections. Everything. That's going to be harder, but I'll try. And I want every person involved in this program, every researcher, every funder, every administrator. I want them exposed and prosecuted. No backroom deals, no quiet resignations, public trials." Kane hesitated. "Sarah, some of these people are very powerful. They have connections that reach. I don't care. Either we burn it all down or I walk. Your choice." Kane studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay, we burn it down." "How?" "The same way we always do. We go public, we release everything. We let the world decide what happens next. They'll kill us. Probably, but at least we'll die doing something that matters." Sarah almost laughed. "You stole that from Dennis." "Dennis?" "The charge nurse you pretended to kill. He said something similar when he thought he was dying." Kane's expression shifted. Guilt, maybe, or something close to it. "For what it's worth, he's a good man. They all are. The scenario was designed to be convincing, but we made sure no one was actually harmed. Except psychologically." "Yeah, except that." Patel coughed. "Are you two going to keep talking, or are you going to help me up? Because I'm bleeding on a government floor, and I'd really like to not die in a secret bunker." Sarah helped him stand. He was pale but stable. The shoulder wound was messy but not fatal. "Can you walk?" she asked. "If walking means not staying here, then yes." They moved through the tunnels, Kane leading, Sarah supporting Patel, the sounds of fighting echoing from somewhere above them. "Tell me something," Sarah said to Kane's back. "If this was all staged, what was the point of bringing me here? Why not just ask for my help?" "Because we needed to know you'd help for the right reasons. Not because we asked, not because we threatened you, but because you couldn't walk away from people dying, even fake dying." "That's twisted. That's intelligence work." They reached the emergency exit, a heavy blast door with manual controls. Kane started turning the wheel. "One more thing," Sarah said. "Marsh, is she really gone rogue, or is that part of the test too?" Kane paused. "She's real, and she's dangerous. Everything I told you about the other targets is true. We have 24 hours to stop her. And the kid in the glass chamber, Subject 17, also real. Marsh has been running unauthorized trials for months. We only found out about it 2 weeks ago." The door opened with a groan of protesting metal. Cold night air rushed in. Trees, stars, freedom. Kane stepped through first, weapon ready, scanning for threats. Clear. Sarah helped Patel through, then followed. They emerged on a hillside overlooking the valley. Below, she could see Site 17 burning, flames licking up through ventilation shafts, smoke pouring into the sky. "She's destroying the evidence," Kane said quietly. "Or destroying the competition," Sarah countered. An explosion rocked the facility. Then another. Controlled demolitions, taking out specific sections. Sarah watched the lab where she'd confronted Marsh collapse in on itself, watched years of illegal research vanish in fire and rubble, and felt nothing. Patel sat down heavily on a rock. So what happens now? Kane pulled out a satellite phone. Now I call in extraction, get you medical attention, get Sarah somewhere safe, and then we start hunting. For Marsh? For everyone. Marsh, Hastings, the funders, the whole network. We're not stopping until they're all exposed. He made the call. Spoke in clipped military jargon, coordinates, authorization codes. Urgent medical. Hung up. 20 minutes, he said. Helicopters inbound. They waited in silence. Sarah staring at the burning facility. Patel pressing Sarah's blood-soaked jacket against his shoulder. Kane scanning the tree line for threats. Finally, Sarah spoke. You know they'll come after us. The people funding this. They have resources, power. They'll make us disappear. Let them try. You sound confident. I sound suicidal. There's a difference. Kane almost smiled. But if we're going down, we might as well take them with us. The helicopter appeared over the ridge. Black. Unmarked. Military. It landed 50 yards away. Rotor wash whipping Sarah's hair. Medics jumping out with a stretcher for Patel. Kane helped load him. The medics worked quickly, starting an IV, stabilizing the shoulder. Professional. One of them looked at Sarah. You injured, ma'am? No, I'm fine. Sure? You've got blood. I said I'm fine. The medic backed off. Kane climbed aboard, turned to offer Sarah his hand. She looked at him, at the choice he was offering. Get on the helicopter. Help him expose the program. Fight a battle she'd lost once already. Or walk away. Disappear. Find some quiet corner of the world where black operations and genetic experiments couldn't touch her. She thought about Dennis, about Amanda, about Kelly, about all the people she'd thought were dying, about the people who would actually die if Marsh succeeded, about the 17 who died in Kandahar while she survived. Sarah took Kane's hand, climbed aboard. The helicopter lifted off. Below, Site 17 collapsed completely. A final explosion sending debris skyward. Sarah watched it disappear beneath them. Kane handed her a headset. Welcome to the fight. I never left it. No, I suppose you didn't. The helicopter banked hard, heading south, toward Washington, toward whatever came next. Patel's voice came through the headset. Lieutenant Mitchell? Yeah? Thank you for not leaving me in that tunnel. You're welcome. Can I ask you something? When you realized it was all fake, the deaths, the symptoms, all of it, were you relieved or angry? Sarah thought about it. Both. Yeah, me too. They flew in silence for a while. Then Kane's voice. Sarah, I need you to understand something. What we're about to do, going public with this, it's going to destroy lives. Good people who were following orders. Families who had no idea what their loved ones were involved in. Careers and reputations built over decades. It's going to be messy and brutal, and a lot of people are going to get hurt. I know. And you're okay with that? Sarah looked out at the darkness rushing past, at the lights of small towns scattered across the landscape, at all the people down there living normal lives, never knowing how close they'd come to catastrophe. I'm okay with the truth, she said. Whatever comes after is just consequences. Kane nodded. Good. Because we're going to need that attitude when we get to Washington. Why? What's in Washington? A press conference. Tomorrow morning, every major news outlet, and a congressional hearing scheduled for the afternoon. You work fast. I had help. People who've been waiting for someone to blow the whistle on this program. People who have their own grudges against the network. All we had to do was prove it was real. And you're using me as proof. I'm using your survival as proof. Your notes as documentation. And your testimony as the narrative that brings it all together. Sarah felt the weight of it settling on her shoulders. I'm going to be crucified. Probably. But you'll be alive to see it happen. That's more than 17 people got. It was a low blow, but it landed. Because he was right. The helicopter descended toward a private airfield. More vehicles waiting. More security. More faces Sarah didn't recognize. They landed. Medics rushed Patel away on the stretcher. Kane guided Sarah toward a black sedan. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Safe house. You've got 12 hours to prep your testimony. Lawyers will go over everything. Media consultants will coach you on how to present it. And then tomorrow morning, you're going to stand in front of cameras and tell the world what happened to you." Sarah stopped walking. "I can't do this." "Yes, you can." "No, I mean I literally can't. I signed an NDA. If I violate it, I go to prison." Kane pulled a document from his jacket, handed it to her. "Presidential pardon, issued 2 hours ago. Full immunity for any testimony related to illegal government programs. You're covered." Sarah stared at the paper. Official seal, signatures, legal, real. "How did you... I told you, I had help. People in high places who want this program ended. They've been building a case for months. You're the missing piece." "Lucky me. Lucky all of us." They got in the sedan, drove through the night. Sarah watched the city lights appear on the horizon. Washington, D.C., where her life had ended 6 years ago, where it was about to end again. Or begin. She honestly didn't know which. The safe house was a nondescript apartment in Georgetown. Heavy security, armed guards, windows with blast film. Inside, a team of people waited. Lawyers, investigators. A woman who introduced herself as a media consultant. They sat Sarah down, asked her questions, took notes, recorded everything. Hours blurred together. Coffee turned cold. Dawn light crept through the windows. Finally, the lead lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia something, leaned back. "Okay, I think we have enough. You should get some rest before the press conference." "I can't sleep." "Try anyway. You need to look composed tomorrow, not like someone who's been up all night." Sarah laughed bitterly. "I am someone who's been up all night." "Then fake it. That's what makeup is for." They showed her to a bedroom, told her to try to sleep. She lay on the bed, stared at the ceiling, thought about everything that had happened, everything that was about to happen. Her phone, a new one they'd given her, buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Don't do it. Walk away while you still can." Sarah stared at the message, deleted it. Another buzz. "We know where you are. We know what you're planning. Stop now or everyone you care about pays the price." Sarah's hand shook. Another buzz. An image this time, a photo, of her apartment in Minneapolis, the safe where she kept her notes. Empty. Someone had broken in, taken everything, all her evidence, all her documentation, all her proof. Gone. Sarah sat up, heart racing, ran to the door, found Kane in the hallway talking on his phone. "They took it," she said. "All of it. The notes, files, everything." Kane's face went pale. "When?" "I don't know. They just sent me a photo. The safe's empty." Kane barked orders into his phone. "I need a team at Mitchell's apartment. Now. Full forensic sweep. And get me security footage from the building." He hung up, looked at Sarah. "How many people knew about the safe?" "Just me." "You sure?" "Yes. I mean, I mentioned it to you in the helicopter, but nobody else." She stopped. "Oh God." "What?" "The recording. From Site 17, I said I'd sent it to someone who'd release it if anything happened to me." "Did you actually send it?" "No, I was bluffing, but if they believed me, then they'd assume you have backup copies, which means they'd search your apartment." Kane's expression hardened. "This is bad. Without the notes, we lose half our case." "I have copies." "Where?" "Digital, encrypted, cloud storage." "Can they access it?" "Not without the password." "Which is?" Sarah hesitated. "I'm not telling you until I know for sure you're not going to screw me over again." Kane almost smiled. "Smart. Keep it that way. Don't tell anyone until tomorrow morning. Don't even write it down. Just hold it in your head. And if something happens to me, then we lose. But at least you go down protecting the information instead of handing it over to people who'll bury it." Sarah's phone buzzed again. Another message. "Last chance. Call off the press conference or watch everyone you ever cared about die screaming." She showed it to Kane. His face was unreadable. "They're bluffing." "You don't know that." "Yes, I do. Because if they could actually get to you, they would have done it already. This is psychological warfare. They're hoping you'll fold." "What if I do?" "Then they win. And Marsh releases her compound in 5 more cities, and hundreds, maybe thousands, die. And you get to live with that for the rest of your life. Sarah looked at the message again, deleted it. Okay, she said. We do this. We burn it all down. You sure? No, but I'm doing it anyway. Kane nodded. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be hell. Sarah went back to the bedroom, lay down, closed her eyes, didn't sleep, just waited for dawn. And when it came, she got up. Let the makeup artist cover the circles under her eyes. Let the stylist choose her clothes. Let the lawyers brief her one more time on what to say. And then she stood in front of a room full of cameras and reporters and congressional aides and told them everything. About Kandahar, about the illegal experiments, about the 17 who died, about the program that turned soldiers into genetic test subjects, about Marsh, about Kane, about Hastings and Webb and everyone who'd played a part, about the attack on Riverside General, about the staged deaths, about the manipulation and the lies, about all of it. The room erupted, questions screamed from every direction, cameras flashing, voices overlapping. Kane stood beside her, confirming details, adding documentation. Patricia, the lawyer, fielded the worst of it. Hours passed in a blur, and when it was finally over, when the last question had been asked and the last camera had shut off, Sarah walked out of that building into the afternoon sun. Free. For the first time in 6 years. Actually free. Her phone buzzed. A text from Dennis. The real Dennis. Verified number. Saw the press conference. Holy hell. You're either the bravest person I know or the craziest. Probably both. We're okay, by the way. All of us. Riverside's a mess, but we're alive. Thank you for telling the truth. Sarah smiled. Then another text. Unknown number. You made a mistake. Now you'll pay for it. Everyone you love will pay for it, starting with the people at Riverside General. The smile died. Sarah looked up at Kane, who was talking to someone from the Justice Department. She held up her phone. He read the message. His face went hard. Get her protection. Now. And get a team to Riverside. Full lockdown. Nobody in or out. But Sarah knew it was already too late. Marsh had made her move, and Sarah had just painted a target on everyone she'd tried to save. Kane was already moving before Sarah finished reading the message. He grabbed his phone, barking orders as he pushed through the crowd of journalists still lingering outside the building. I need air support over Riverside General, now, and ground units. Full tactical deployment. Authorization Omega Black. Sarah ran after him. How fast can you get there? Not fast enough. Kane's jaw was tight. Minneapolis is 1,000 miles away. Even with a military jet, we're looking at 2 hours minimum. Then call the local police, FBI, anyone. Already on it. He was typing while walking, nearly colliding with a photographer. But if Marsh is serious about this, if she's really deployed another agent, then local response won't matter. They won't know what they're dealing with. Sarah's mind raced. Dennis, Amanda, Jessica, all the people who'd been part of the simulation, all the people who thought they'd survived something terrible, only to find out it had all been theater. All the people who were about to face something real. I'm going with you, she said. Kane didn't slow down. No, you're not. You're staying here under protection until we neutralize the threat. Those are my people. I'm not hiding while they die. They're not your people anymore. You quit that life when you went public. Sarah grabbed his arm, forcing him to stop. I didn't quit anything. I told the truth. That doesn't mean I stopped caring about people I worked with for years. Kane looked at her, really looked at her. And for the first time since she'd known him, she saw something other than calculated strategy in his eyes. Respect. Fine, he said. But you follow my orders. No heroics, no improvising. You do exactly what I say when I say it. Deal. They ran to the waiting motorcade, black SUVs with armed drivers. Kane shoved Sarah into the back of the lead vehicle and climbed in after her. The convoy was moving before the doors even closed. Where's the nearest airfield? Kane demanded. The driver responded without taking his eyes off the road. Andrews Air Force Base, 15 minutes. Make it 10. The SUV accelerated, weaving through D.C. traffic with the kind of aggressive confidence that came with federal authority and diplomatic plates. Sarah braced herself against the door as they took a corner hard enough to lift 2 wheels. Her phone buzzed again. Another message. A video this time. Sarah's hand shook as she opened it. The footage showed Riverside General's parking lot. Same news vans, same protesters, same barricades. But now there were people running, screaming, falling. Real symptoms this time. Real panic. The camera zoomed in on a figure standing at the edge of the chaos, wearing civilian clothes, face partially obscured by a surgical mask. But Sarah recognized the posture, the way she stood, the tilt of her head. Dr. Helen Marsh. She was watching the chaos unfold like an artist admiring her own work. Then she looked directly at the camera, pulled down her mask, smiled, and mouthed 2 words. Your fault. The video ended. Sarah felt bile rise in her throat. She's there, right now. She's at Riverside. Kane grabbed her phone, watched the video, swore viciously. How old is this footage? Timestamp says 18 minutes ago. Then she's probably gone by now, but we can still track her. He forwarded the video to someone, typed rapid-fire instructions. Facial recognition. Cross-reference with security cameras in a 5-mile radius. I want her location in the next 10 minutes, or heads are going to roll. The SUV screamed onto the airfield. A military jet sat waiting, engines already spooling up. Sarah had never been so grateful for government efficiency in her life. They boarded at a run. The jet was moving before they'd even buckled in. Sarah pressed her face to the window, watching D.C. disappear beneath them. The city where she'd just burned her old life to the ground. The city where she'd told the truth and damned the consequences. The city she might never see again if Marsh succeeded. Kane was on his phone, coordinating with what sounded like a dozen different agencies: FBI, CDC, local law enforcement, military units. Everyone scrambling to respond to a threat they didn't fully understand. No, you can't evacuate the hospital, he was saying. If people scatter, the contamination spreads. You need containment. Yes, I know that's unpopular. I don't care. Lock it down. Nobody in, nobody out. He hung up. Immediately another call came in. Kane? Yes, sir. I understand the political ramifications. No, sir, I don't think this is an overreaction, because I've seen what this compound does to human tissue, and if we don't stop it now, Minneapolis becomes a mass casualty event that makes 9/11 look like a traffic accident. Yes, sir. I'll accept full responsibility. He ended the call, looked at Sarah. That was the Secretary of Defense. He's not happy. Good. Maybe he'll actually do something useful. He authorized a tactical strike on Riverside if containment fails. Sarah's blood went cold. A strike? You mean... I mean, if this gets out of hand, they'll level the entire hospital to prevent spread. Everyone inside dies. Clean sweep. That's murder. That's triage. Save 1,000 by sacrificing 100. There has to be another way. If there is, we have about 90 minutes to find it before someone makes that decision for us. The jet climbed higher. Sarah could see the curvature of the earth now, the vastness of the country spread out below them. So many cities, so many people. So many potential targets. And Marsh had promised 5 more. Where are the other targets? Sarah asked. The other cities she's planning to hit? Kane pulled up a map on his tablet. Red dots marked 5 locations. Chicago, Atlanta, Phoenix, Seattle, Miami, all major population centers, all with hospitals similar to Riverside. When? We don't know. Could be simultaneous, could be sequential. She's not exactly sharing her timeline. Sarah studied the map. Something about the pattern bothered her. These aren't random. What do you mean? Look at the locations. They're spread across the country, different time zones, different climates, different demographics. So she's testing variables, seeing how the compound performs in different environments, different populations, different emergency response capabilities. Kane's eyes narrowed. You're saying this is still a field test? I'm saying she's treating an entire country like her personal laboratory. Then we need to shut down the lab before she publishes her results. Sarah's phone buzzed again. She almost didn't want to look, but she did. Another video. This one showed the inside of Riverside's ER, the same ER where Sarah had worked for years, where she'd pulled double shifts and taken abuse from Webb and quietly saved lives without recognition. Now it was chaos, real chaos this time. People convulsing, bleeding, dying. Dennis was in the frame, trying to help someone. His face pale, his hands shaking. Then he looked up, directly at the camera, like he knew Sarah would see this, and he mouthed something. 3 words. Not your fault. The video cut to black. Sarah's vision blurred. Tears she'd been holding back for hours, years maybe, finally breaking through. Kane put a hand on her shoulder. Awkward. Uncomfortable with emotion, but trying. "We're going to stop this," he said. "You don't know that." "No, but I'm going to act like I do until proven otherwise." The jet began its descent. Minneapolis, appearing on the horizon. Sarah could see smoke rising from the direction of the hospital, even from this altitude. They landed at a military airfield, another convoy waiting, more armed personnel, more grim faces. A woman in combat fatigues approached. "Major Kane, situation update." "Talk to me, Captain." "Containment is holding, but barely. We've got 43 symptomatic patients, 17 critical, 3 dead. Local hospitals are refusing transfers, CDC is en route but won't arrive for another hour, and we've got a media circus outside the barricades that's making crowd control a nightmare." "What about Marsh?" "No visual confirmation since the initial sighting. Facial recognition picked her up heading north on Hennepin Avenue 20 minutes ago, but we lost her in traffic." Kane swore. "She's running." "Or she's moving to the next target," Sarah said quietly. Kane looked at her. "You think she's still in the city?" "I think she wants to watch her work. She didn't leave Kandahar until the last body was bagged. She won't leave here either." "Then we find her before she disappears." They climbed into the convoy, raced toward Riverside General. Sarah watched the city blur past. Streets she knew, buildings she recognized, a life she'd built and lost and was now trying to save. The hospital came into view, surrounded by military vehicles, armed soldiers in biohazard gear, news helicopters circling overhead like vultures, and protesters. Still there, still holding signs, still convinced this was all government overreach. They had no idea what they were protesting. The convoy pushed through the barricades. Sarah jumped out before the vehicle fully stopped. Kane grabbed her arm. "Wait for clearance. If there's active contamination, then I'm already exposed from being here earlier. Might as well make it count." She pulled free and ran toward the ER entrance. A soldier tried to stop her. Kane shouted something. The soldier backed off. Sarah pushed through the doors into controlled chaos. Military medics working alongside hospital staff. Equipment everywhere. The smell of disinfectant and fear and something else. Something chemical that made her skin crawl. She found Dennis near the nurse's station. He was holding pressure on someone's bleeding wound while simultaneously barking orders at a junior nurse. His eyes were red. His scrubs were soaked with sweat and blood. He looked up when Sarah approached. Did a double take. "You're here." "Yeah. You shouldn't be here." "Neither should you, but here we are." Dennis almost laughed. It came out as a sob. "I saw your press conference. Saw you tell the whole world about Kandahar, about us, about how it was all fake." His voice broke. "This isn't fake, Sarah. This is real. People are actually dying this time. I know. I'm sorry. Don't apologize. Just help me save them." Sarah grabbed a pair of gloves from the supply cart, snapped them on, fell into the familiar rhythm of emergency medicine. Assess. Prioritize. Treat. The compound was different from what she'd seen in Kandahar. Faster acting, more aggressive. The symptoms were the same: seizures, respiratory failure, hemorrhaging, but compressed into a timeline that left almost no window for intervention, which meant Marsh had refined it, made it worse. Sarah moved from patient to patient doing what she could, which wasn't much. Atropine didn't work. Traditional nerve agent protocols didn't work. All they could do was manage symptoms and hope the patient's body could fight it off. Most couldn't. She watched a woman in her 30s die despite everything they tried. Watched a teenager seize so violently his spine fractured. Watched an elderly man beg for help they couldn't give. And through it all, she kept working. Because that's what you did. You didn't give up. You didn't walk away. You stood in the fire and tried to pull people out even when the flames were eating you alive. Kane found her 2 hours later. She was sitting on the floor outside Trauma 3, her back against the wall, covered in other people's blood. "We found her," he said. Sarah looked up. "Where?" "Airport, private terminal. She was trying to board a chartered jet." "Was?" "My team intercepted her. She's in custody now." Sarah stood slowly. Her legs were shaking. "She say anything?" "Just her lawyer's name, but we found something in her possession." Kane held up a small metal case. 3 more canisters, unmarked. We're running tests now, but we think they're the other deployment devices. For the other cities? Yeah, we stopped her before she could distribute them. Sarah felt something loosen in her chest. Relief. Exhaustion. Something that might have been hope if she'd had any energy left for it. So it's over. Kane hesitated. The immediate threat, yes. But there's still a network out there. People who funded this. People who profited from it. People who'll try again unless we cut off every head of this particular hydra. Then we keep fighting. You don't have to. You've done enough. You can walk away now with your head held high. Sarah looked around the ER, at the carnage, at the survivors, at Dennis, still working, still saving lives despite everything. No, she said quietly. I can't walk away, not from this. Sarah, I spent 6 years hiding. 6 years pretending I was someone else. 6 years letting fear control my choices. I'm done hiding. I'm done pretending. And I'm sure as hell done letting people like Marsh decide who lives and who dies. Kane studied her face. What are you saying? I'm saying I want in. All the way in. Whatever you're building to take down this network, I want to be part of it. It's dangerous work. People will come after you. Your life will never be normal. My life hasn't been normal since Kandahar. At least this way I'm choosing the danger instead of having it choose me. Kane nodded slowly. Okay, but we do this right. No cowboy heroics, no going rogue. You work within the system even when the system is broken. Deal. They shook on it, a strange moment of understanding between 2 people who'd spent years being used by the same machine. Over the next 24 hours, the dominoes started falling. Marsh was formally charged with bioterrorism, multiple counts of murder, conspiracy, and about 15 other federal crimes. No bail. Maximum security facility. Her lawyers were already arguing mental incompetence, but the video evidence made that a hard sell. Hastings was arrested at his home in suburban Minneapolis. The investigation into his involvement revealed he'd been receiving payments from a shell corporation tied to Marsh's research network. He'd knowingly facilitated the Riverside attack in exchange for funding promises for the hospital's expansion. His medical license was revoked within hours. His assets frozen. His reputation destroyed. Webb was trickier. He genuinely believed he was following medical judgment when he ignored Sarah's warnings. But his communication with Hastings showed he'd been pressured to keep the ER operational regardless of risks. The medical board launched an ethics investigation. His future was uncertain. Patricia Vance, the hospital's legal counsel, turned state's evidence, started naming names, connecting dots, building a case that reached into corporate boardrooms and government offices. The network was bigger than anyone had imagined, and Sarah was going to help dismantle it piece by piece. But first, she had something else to do. 3 weeks after the Riverside attack, Sarah stood in front of the hospital's main entrance. The building had been decontaminated, the lockdown lifted, operations slowly returning to normal. Dennis met her at the door. He looked tired but alive. His arm was in a sling from a shoulder injury sustained during the chaos, but he was smiling. You came back. I needed to see how everyone's doing. We're surviving, some better than others. Dennis's smile faded. We lost 11. 8 patients, 3 staff. Could have been worse if you hadn't figured out what we were dealing with. Could have been better if I'd never been involved in the first place. Don't do that. Don't take responsibility for other people's evil. You didn't create this. You just got caught in it. And dragged all of you in with me. We were always in it, Sarah. We just didn't know it yet. Dennis gestured toward the ER. Come on. There's something you should see. He led her inside. The ER looked different. New equipment. Fresh paint. But the bones were the same, the space where she'd spent years of her life feeling invisible. And now, near the nurse's station, there was a plaque. Sarah walked closer, read the inscription. In memory of the 11 lives lost during the bioterrorism attack of 2026. And in recognition of Lieutenant Sarah Mitchell, whose courage and expertise prevented a catastrophe of unimaginable scale. Heroes come in many forms. Sometimes they wear combat boots. Sometimes they wear scrubs. Always they stand between us and darkness. Sarah's throat tightened. Amanda appeared from behind the station. She was thinner than Sarah remembered, shadows under her eyes, but alive. We wanted to do something, Amanda said quietly, to make sure people remembered, not just what happened, but who helped stop it. Jessica emerged next, then other nurses Sarah had worked with, then doctors, techs, even some patients who'd been there that night. They formed a loose circle around her. Dennis spoke. Sarah, we know you're working with the federal government now. We know you're going after the people responsible. We know you're probably going to be traveling, testifying, fighting battles most of us can't imagine. But we wanted you to know, Amanda continued, that you'll always have a place here. If you ever want to come back, if you ever need a home. Sarah looked around at these people, these ordinary, extraordinary people who showed up every day to save strangers, who faced trauma and death and bureaucracy and impossible choices, who did it all for salaries that barely covered rent and recognition that came in the form of complaints more often than thanks. These were her people, not the politicians, not the military brass, not the investigators and lawyers and professional truth-tellers. These people, right here. Thank you, she managed. That means more than you know. The group dispersed slowly, back to work, back to saving lives. Dennis walked Sarah to the exit. What you're doing, going after the network. It's important, but don't lose yourself in it. Don't become what you're fighting. I'll try. Promise me, when this is over, when you've done what you need to do, promise me you'll come back, not to work, just to remember who you were before all this happened. Sarah looked at him, at this man who'd believed she was dying during the simulation, who'd called his wife to say goodbye, who'd come back to work anyway and kept saving lives. I promise. Outside, Kane was waiting by a black sedan. He'd been made the official liaison for the investigation into the genetic weapons network, which basically meant he got to spend the next year testifying before Congress and coordinating raids on suspected facilities. Sarah had been appointed as a special consultant, civilian advisor, the public face of the victims. It wasn't the life she'd imagined, but it was the life she had. Ready? Kane asked. Yeah. They drove to the federal building downtown. More meetings, more testimony, more names to add to the list of people who'd profited from turning human beings into experiments. But before they went inside, Sarah's phone buzzed. A news alert. Major networks. Breaking story. Former hospital director Martin Hastings found dead in federal custody. Apparent suicide. Investigation ongoing. Sarah showed Kane. His face was unreadable. Suicide. Right. You don't believe it? I believe powerful people don't like loose ends, and Hastings was about to testify against some very powerful people. Sarah felt cold. So they killed him. So someone made sure he couldn't talk. Whether that's murder or just strategic pressure that led to suicide, we'll probably never know. This is never going to end, is it? We take down Marsh, someone else takes her place. We expose the network, they just build a new one. Kane looked at her. Probably not. But that doesn't mean we stop fighting. It just means we fight smarter. They went inside. Spent 6 hours in a conference room with lawyers and investigators and people whose job titles Sarah didn't fully understand. They built cases, connected evidence, identified targets, and slowly, methodically, they started to dismantle the machine. 3 months later, Sarah stood in front of a congressional committee. Cameras everywhere. Every major news outlet covering the hearing live. She told her story. All of it. Kandahar. The survival, the cover-up, the intimidation, the NDA that had kept her silent for years. She named names, showed documents, presented evidence, and she watched as one by one, the architects of the genetic weapons program were forced to answer for their actions. Some went to prison. Some cut deals. Some fled the country. But they all fell. Not all of them. The network was too vast, too entrenched, but enough. Enough to send a message. Enough to make the next person think twice before playing God with human DNA. Enough to matter. 6 months after Riverside, Sarah received an offer. A new position. Director of the National Biodefense Medical Response Initiative, a federal program designed to train first responders in biological threat recognition and response. Her own program. Her own team. Her own chance to make sure what happened to her never happened to anyone else. She accepted. The office was in Bethesda, Maryland. Modern building, good funding, actual resources instead of empty promises. And on her first day, she walked into a conference room to meet her new team. Dennis was there. He'd taken a leave of absence from Riverside to join her, transferred his expertise to the federal level. Amanda was there too. Younger, less experienced, but fierce and determined, and exactly the kind of person Sarah wanted teaching the next generation. Even Dr. Patel had signed on, his shoulder healed, his fiancée safe, his guilt channeled into purpose. Cross was there as well, transferred from his previous posting, military liaison. The person who'd make sure civilian and military operations could actually coordinate instead of just tripping over each other. And Kane, no longer a major. He'd resigned his commission rather than face a court-martial for his role in the Kandahar cover-up, but he'd been hired as a civilian advisor, someone who knew how black operations worked, who could spot them before they metastasized. Sarah looked around at this unlikely team, built from trauma, forged in crisis, united by the understanding that sometimes the only way to stop evil was to have seen it firsthand. "Okay," she said. "Let's get to work." They spent the next year building protocols, training teams, establishing partnerships with hospitals across the country. Sarah traveled constantly, giving lectures, running simulations, teaching emergency staff how to recognize bioweapon exposure before it turned into a catastrophe. She became the face of the program, the survivor who'd turned her trauma into purpose, the nurse who'd been dismissed and ignored and ultimately proven right. The media loved the story, the underdog who'd exposed government corruption, the whistleblower who'd saved lives. Sarah hated the attention but understood its value. Every interview was a chance to educate. Every profile was a platform to demand change. And slowly, things did change. New oversight committees, stricter regulations on genetic research, mandatory reporting requirements for unusual contamination events. It wasn't perfect. Systems never were. But it was better. One evening, Sarah found herself back in Minneapolis, a conference at Riverside General, teaching a new generation of ER staff about threat recognition. Dr. Webb was there. He'd survived the ethics investigation but lost his position as trauma chief. He was working as an attending now, no longer the golden boy, just another doctor trying to do his job. He approached Sarah during a break. "Lieutenant Mitchell?" "Just Sarah now. I left the rank behind." "Right. I wanted to apologize for how I treated you, for not listening when you tried to warn me, for putting my ego ahead of patient safety." Sarah studied him. He looked older, tired, maybe a little wiser. "You learn anything from it?" she asked. "Yeah. That the quietest people in the room are sometimes the smartest, and that credentials don't mean much if you're too arrogant to hear the truth." "Good. Then maybe something useful came out of this nightmare." Webb nodded, started to walk away, turned back. "For what it's worth, you were always a better nurse than I was a doctor. I just couldn't admit it." "I know. But thanks for saying it anyway." After the conference, Sarah walked through the ER one last time, past the plaque, past the rooms where people had fought and died and survived, past the nurse's station where she'd spent years being invisible. She wasn't invisible anymore. For better or worse, she'd become exactly the opposite. But standing there, in that space where her old life had ended and her new one had begun, Sarah felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not happiness, not contentment. Those were luxuries for people whose lives hadn't been shattered and rebuilt. But peace. The understanding that she'd done what she could with what she had. That she'd told the truth even when it cost her everything. That she'd stood up when standing up was dangerous. That she'd survived not by hiding, but by fighting. Her phone buzzed. A text from Kane. "New facility identified in Oregon. Possible genetic research. Need your assessment. Can you fly out tomorrow?" Sarah smiled, typed back, "I'll be there." Because the work wasn't done. The network was wounded, but not dead. There would always be someone trying to play God with science. Someone convinced that the ends justified the means. And there would always be people like Sarah, standing in their way, refusing to let the quiet ones stay silent, refusing to let the powerful get away with murder just because they wore nice suits and spoke in jargon. She walked out of Riverside General into the evening air. The city lights were coming on, people heading home from work, living normal lives, never knowing how close they'd come to catastrophe, never knowing that someone they'd ignored for years had saved them all. Sarah was okay with that. She didn't need recognition, didn't need statues or monuments or her name in headlines. She just needed to know that the next time someone tried to weaponize human biology, there would be people ready to stop them, people who'd seen the worst and survived, people who'd been dismissed and proven essential. People like her. The quiet ones who became loud when it mattered, the invisible ones who refused to disappear. The survivors who turned their pain into purpose and their trauma into truth. Sarah got in her car, started the engine, pulled out into traffic, and drove toward whatever came next. Because that's what you did when the world tried to break you and failed. You got up, you kept moving, you found the other people who'd been broken and put yourselves back together into something stronger than you'd been before. You fought, you survived, you won. Not perfectly, not easily, not without scars, but you won. And somewhere in Minneapolis, in a hospital ER that had almost become a tomb, a plaque caught the light. Remembering the fallen, honoring the survivor. Proving that sometimes the person nobody took seriously becomes the person everyone needs. And that courage doesn't always announce itself with fanfare. Sometimes it just shows up to work, does the job, speaks the truth, and refuses to be silenced.